Neil, I'm going to go ahead and start the timer. When you start talking, you can start your affirmative that Christians and Muslims do, in fact, worship the same God. I'll give you a 1-minute warning, okay?
Sure.
All right.
So my argument is very simple. It's an anthropological argument, not a theological argument. So I'm looking at the history of the worship of this particular God, and Muslims, Christians, and Jews do in fact worship the same God. There was a God in history who was worshipped in Jerusalem for roughly 1,000 years at the temple in Jerusalem, called Yahweh, El, in some cases, Arabic, Allah, Adonai, stuff, had different various titles, epithets, names, but there was whatever you want to call it. We could call it God in English. There was one God in Jerusalem who was worshipped. He is considered to be the God of Abraham, that apparently sent oracles to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses. According to the Torah, led the Jews out of Egypt into the Promised Land. So the Exodus, that type of thing. So this God is worshipped. This is one of these gods. And now there's other temples. So there's a temple in Samaria. There's another temple in Egypt as well. But that's getting way too deep into the weeds for this discussion. The point is, we all agree here that there's one of those gods. It's the God of Abraham, and Christians break off of Judaism at some point at the end of the first century. The Gospels get written. Christianity goes in a total different direction. I'm guessing my opponent's going to get into theology and the Trinity, the fact that Jesus is God incarnate. Muslims don't believe in that, but there were Christians in the beginning in that early period. One example is the Ebionites, who didn't think Jesus was literally God incarnate, but they were Christians and thought Jesus was the Messiah. But they worshiped that one particular God that I mentioned. So I'm not even making an argument from that the name is Allah and Allah is the name in Arabic for God. I'm not even making that argument. It would be like if someone decided that there's two different people who go to the same doctor named Michael Smith, but there's two different Michael Smith doctors. That doesn't mean they have the same doctor named Michael Smith. But what I'm saying, I'm going further than that. I'm saying that it's the same doctor's office, and it's literally the same Michael Smith who is the same doctor of these two people. So it's an anthropological argument, as I said. The Quran comes about around the 7th century. And one of the passages is from 2:136, Surah Al-Barqa. It says, "Believers, we believe in Allah, who revealed to us what has been revealed to Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, the descendants, and what was given to Moses and Jesus." So whoever wrote the Quran is literally just saying, this is the same God who Jews and Christians worship. We're worshiping this God now. Another verse from the Surah Al-Imran: "Abraham was neither a Jew nor a Christian, but he was one reclining towards a Muslim, submitting to Allah, and he was not one of the polytheists." Now, that's a theological argument that they're making, that Abraham wasn't a Jew, which is nonsense. But it is, in fact, claiming that Abraham worships this God that they worship. So that's just another point to what I'm saying. Surah Al-Ikhlas: Allah, one who is Allah, the eternal refuge, neither begets nor is born. There's only one, him, and there's no equivalent. There's one of these gods. Let's see. Surah Al-Mahdi, 544 and 546, says, "Indeed, we sent down the Torah," which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament, "in which was guidance and light. And we sent," by the way, this is the angel Gabriel speaking. Gabriel is a big deal in Christianity and Judaism. "And we sent following in their footsteps Jesus, the son of Mary, confirming that which came before him in the Torah, and we gave him the gospel, which was guidance and light." And there's a whole bunch of this stuff. I mean, here's the people mentioned in the Quran. You have Adam, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Job, Ishmael, Moses, Aaron, Ezekiel, Jonah, David, Solomon, Elijah, Elisha, Zechariah, John the Baptist, Jesus, Mary, Saul, Goliath, and Aaron. So these are all figures who the Quran is pointing to as prophets of their religion. These are all the same prophets you find in Judaism and Christianity. So it's pretty clear that the Muslims worship the same God, the Jewish God, Yahweh, who was worshipped by Jews in Israel for about 1,000 years until the end of the temple in 70 AD. It's the same God. And so the only thing we're going to get into is theological stuff. We can disagree on what we think about this God. For example, let me use an allegory of a painting on a wall. There's one painting on a wall. And you and I both look at this painting, and you think that the painting has, you think that the person painted on the painting has 3 heads. And I said, that's not 3 heads. That's just one big protrude head. You're not looking at it right. It doesn't matter if we disagree on what the nature of the painting is. It's still one painting that we disagree on. That's what's happening in Islam and Christianity. Christianity has their idea of the nature of God, Trinity, Jesus was the God incarnate, all that stuff that Muslims don't hold to. But that's a theological opinion, if you will, on the nature of God. It doesn't mean that this is a different God or something. The only argument you can make to say that Allah is different than Yahweh or the Trinity is by saying that somehow Muhammad or whoever wrote the Quran was actually being tricked by a demon. And this demon is telling him to write all this stuff and pretending it's Yahweh or the God of Christianity and Judaism, but they're tricked. They're actually following a demon. But still, even if that's the case, they still think they're worshiping the same God as you. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. 3 minutes to spare. Anything else you want to add with 3 minutes left?
No, that's it.
Okay, cool. All right, Alex, your 10 minutes starts when you begin. Do you want me to bring your screen right off the bat?
Yeah, please.
Okay, cool. And go ahead.
Okay. The point at issue for tonight's debate is whether Christians and Muslims worship the same God. My name is Alex Sorin, and I'm going to argue from an Orthodox Christian perspective. I'm going to show you in my opening statement here that Christians and Muslims do not, in fact, worship the same God. Christians and Muslims worship different gods. I will show that this is obvious according to the most basic laws of logic and even a cursory review of history. Indeed, Christians worship Jesus, the Christian God, and Muslims do not worship Jesus. In fact, they reject that he is God. Muslims worship the Muslim God. And we can set out some essential differences between the Christian God and the Islamic God from the outset here. So Christians worship Jesus as God, and this is important to establish early, as it may be hard for Neil to grasp, maybe, but Islam explicitly rejects that Jesus is God. And when looking at whether a term has the same referent, this kind of explicit denial breaks the linguistic chain. It's an intervening cause. The referent cannot be the same. So Christians worship the Trinity. Islam explicitly rejects the Trinity. That's another intervening cause. Christians teach that God begets. Islam rejects that God begets. That's another intervening cause. Christians teach that God is begotten and has a mother. Islam explicitly rejects that God has a mother. That's more intervening causes. Christians teach that our God, Jesus, died on a cross and took up his human life again. Islam explicitly rejects that Jesus died on a cross. That's another intervening cause. Christians teach that we eat God in the Eucharist. Islam rejects this too, and for them, it's probably shirk, which is another intervening cause. And this is just a very brief comparison of some of the essential attributes of the Christian God to some essential attributes of the Islamic God. And you can see not only that they are different, these are numerous head-on intervening contradictions. These contradictions are made even more manifest when we apply Leibniz's law of logic. Leibniz's law is an introductory logical rule which tells us that if the Christian God is the same as the Islamic God, then whatever you can say is true of the Christian God can also be said as true of the Islamic God. And as you can see in this chart that I put up previously, that is not the case. These amount to contradictions violating Leibniz's law. So according to basic logic, it is blatantly obvious for anyone to see that Christians and Muslims are not worshiping the same God. They worship different gods. But perhaps a purely logical approach is too legalistic. We are human beings after all, and sometimes we get the details wrong. Although I've shown here already that even the essentials are contradicting. But let's give Neil the benefit of the doubt and look at an historical perspective, taking Christianity and Islam each on their own terms at their word. Our question then becomes, is there a shared historical chain between Christianity and Islam for the term God that directs the worshiper to the same referent? No, there is not, and I'll show you why. Both Christianity and Islam claim continuity from Abraham. I'll concede that. They claim that, of course. But the Christian referent for God is fixed upon a superseding historical cause in the incarnation of Christ. The Islamic referent for God is fixed upon an intervening superseding historical cause that outright rejects the incarnation of Christ, which is the supposed revelation to their prophet Muhammad. Now let's briefly analyze both, and we'll start with Christianity. During the Second Temple period leading up to the time of Christ, Judaism and its understanding of God was not monolithic. Second Temple Judaism held a range of permissible views on God. Daniel Boyarin, a scholar of the Second Temple period, I know Neil is very familiar with him, concludes that it's possible most Jews were binitarian already by the 1st century AD. Peter Schaeffer, another scholar of the Second Temple period, pushes that date even further back, concluding that triumphant monotheism cannot be maintained for post-exilic Judaism after the Book of Daniel. And with the Hellenistic Jewish theologian Philo of Alexandria, we see the emergence of a three powers doctrine, as we see here in his commentary on Genesis 18 with the three visitors to Abraham. The Second Temple period was also the period of Memra theology, paralleling almost exactly the Logos theology of Philo. What we see is that outside of a few exceptions, like Abraham or Moses, for example, the Old Testament was a progressive revelation of God waiting to be fulfilled. Nonetheless, it is ambiguous on the surface, resulting in a range of views during the Second Temple period that still had the same referent of God. The incarnation, however, is a superseding historical cause that does away with that ambiguity and fixes the Christian referent for the term God. Christianity teaches Jesus of Nazareth, the Christ, he is God incarnate, and he is the definitive, complete self-revelation of God. There is no new public revelation after Christ's ascension. St. John, speaking of Christ, teaches us that no one has ever seen God. The only one, himself God, who is in closest fellowship with the Father, he has made God known. Note, Jesus only has made God known. St. John later records Jesus saying to the Jewish elders, "You do not have the Father, nor have you heard his voice, nor is his word residing in you, because you do not believe in me. You study the scriptures in vain, because you are not willing to come to me." And we see in Jude 3 that the Christian faith was once for all entrusted to the saints. This is not something that's going to be changing. So out of the ambiguity of the Second Temple period, where the term God has a loose referent, we see that Christians have definitively fixed the referent for God in their system for all time in the incarnation of Christ. He revealed the doctrine of the Holy Trinity, wherein Christians identify Jesus as true God from true God. Numerous councils act as supporting historical causes as well, further specifying the Christian referent for the term God. So the superseding historical cause for the Christian referent of the term God is affixed in the incarnation. Islam rejects all of those historical causes. Literally every single one of those historical causes are rejected by Muslims. Islam, in fact, claims that the previous revelation to Israel and the previous revelation to the Christians was misinterpreted, twisted, concealed, or even corrupted. Islam claims that the Quran is not only a superseding cause, but an intervening superseding cause, correcting and sometimes totally retconning prior scriptures. Some of this extensive retconning includes, for example, the Bible says Aaron participated in the golden calf incident, while the Quran says that Aaron tries to stop the golden calf incident. The Quran says a Samaritan, not Aaron, facilitated the golden calf incident, while in the Bible, Samaritans didn't even exist until after the Assyrian conquest of the northern kingdom, like centuries later. While the Quran acknowledges the existence of sacrifices, it writes off essentially all of the Bible's sacrificial theology, including the covenantal, priestly, liturgical, and atoning significance of those sacrifices. The Bible says that Jesus is God. The Quran says Jesus is not God. The Bible says Jesus underwent human death on the cross. The Quran says that Jesus did not die, nor was he even affixed upon a cross. It was just an illusion. So we see every evidence that the Quran sees itself as a superseding, intervening break from historical continuity, and therefore assigns a new referent for the term God. And not only that, it's consciously antithetical to the Christian referent in the incarnation of Christ. So this is very simple. The historical argument summarized is that the incarnation fixes the referent of the term God for Christians. Muslims deny the incarnation. Therefore, Muslims and Christians, they cannot have the same reference for God. It's impossible. They are worshiping different gods. So whether you're analyzing this descriptively or historically, it doesn't matter. Logically, the essential attributes of the Christian God and the essential attributes of the Islamic God contradict. Therefore, according to Leibniz's law, Christians and Muslims are worshiping different gods. Historically, the incarnation of Christ is the superseding cause setting the referent of the term God for Christians. Islam denies the incarnation. Therefore, it's impossible to have the same referent. And we debate on this topic, but the Bible already tells us this in 1 John chapter 2. We're told that everyone who denies the Son does not have the Father either. The person who confesses the Son has the Father also. In Surah 112:3, expressly denies the Son. So, Neil, I'd like for you to tell me, if we got into a time machine with a Muslim friend and we went back to Jerusalem in 33 AD or so, and we saw Jesus of Nazareth there hanging on a cross, I, as a Christian, could point to him and say, that's God. That is my referent. Can a Muslim do the same? The answer is no. And one final point. In Christianity, worship has a specific meaning and refers to the atoning sacrifice of Christ, an atoning sacrifice, specifically the offering of the Eucharist. Islam has no atoning sacrifices in its theology. So even if it is the same referent, which it's not, Muslims are not worshiping the Christian God anyway. It's just like they're honoring him really hard. So based on simple logic and historical chains, Christians and Muslims worship different gods. But even if they had the same referent, which they don't, Muslims would not be worshiping anyway. So thank you, everyone. God bless you. And thanks, Neil, for taking on this debate. I cede the remainder of my time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, the next up is the rebuttals. That is not cross-examination, so there's no responses. Neil, you have 7 minutes for a rebuttal against Alex and his opening or something else.
Yeah, wow. A lot of begging the question on steroids. Like worship has worship the connotation as the Eucharist. Like, how do I know that? How does a Muslim know that? How does anyone know that? Also, the idea that you alluded to laws of logic, saying that for something to be the same as the other, it has to have all the same attributes. Well, then why aren't all the Jews Trinitarians? Do you think Judaism has a different God than Christianity? I'd like to get into that when we get back and forth. No mentions of Trinity in the Old Testament at all. You can read into some parts. You can say, "Oh, look, Abraham had 3 angels visit him. Therefore, the Trinity." Durr. All of a sudden, God has a body. Then, like you have now you have a different problem. God is literally says God is not a man, nor is he the Son of Man in multiple verses in the Old Testament. This idea of the incarnation, yeah, that's a theological interpretation held by Christians. But like I said about the painting on the wall, there is not 2 paintings because 2 different people see 2 different things on this painting, or get 2 different interpretations of the same painting. It's still the same painting. And as I mentioned, everything you heard from his opening was all theological. You did not demonstrate that Muslims worship a different God. All you said was they don't believe in the same stuff as us. They don't believe Jesus was the incarnation. They don't believe in the Trinity. And as far as like Jews getting closer to the first century and holding similar ideas, no one disagrees with that. Philo, I think Philo is the one who adopted the logos concept from the Middle Platonists, who was a Middle Platonist, who didn't adopt it, he just was a Middle Platonist. Philo was widely rejected by Jews even today, and even in the time of well, I guess we can't really get to sources at that time, but for example, like Philo is closer to a Christian than he is to what you find in a Jew. But Philo's triad isn't a trinity. Philo has a very specific triad where there's the God, the one, who's not the same as the Logos, who creates the Logos. He even says he creates the Logos, who he calls his son, and the Logos acts as a mediator between the mortal realm. That's Philo's triad. As far as and like you brought up ditheism, it's like, yeah, that's still not the triad. So what? It's close enough. I was confused in what you meant by that. Yeah, there's different types of Judaism, different sects: Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, the Alexandrians. The type of people like Philo and Aristobulus. But they have different ideas. They have completely different ideas, different interpretations of Scripture. Some are messianic, some aren't. Some are waiting for this Messiah, some aren't. And so, but do they worship different gods then? No. They're all Jews. They all worship Yahweh. And so when Christianity breaks out of Judaism and starts to call themselves Christianoi in Antioch, Syria, they're not worshiping a different God. They're not saying we think that God from before was just different. They're saying those people are wrong about God. Jesus was the incarnation and so forth. But they're not. No one's ever saying there's a different God in play. So I'm actually curious for what you think about. Do you think all Christians who don't have the Trinity and don't have exactly what the Orthodox picture of God is, are they all not Christians anymore? Do they all worship a different God? Is there multiple Christian gods floating around the world people worship? Because doesn't make any sense to me at all. It just sounds like you think that how you worship is what defines what a God is. But that's silly, because that's like saying how I drive my car determines if the car is different or not. It's still the same car, whoever gets in it, depending on how fast you drive it or what do you think about the car, you're still driving that one car. And so I haven't heard any arguments yet that Muslims worship anything different than the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Ishmael, who they claim to be like descended from. You say, oh yeah, Isaac and Ishmael. Isaac was actually the good one. So they flipped that theological thing on its head. But another thing you pointed out that was interesting to me was the cross. Because Muslims actually adopt Basilidian, which was an early Christian Gnostic view. They were Christians who read John. And they were Johannine Christians who literally had the Gospel of John. It was a little bit altered. I think the Doubting Thomas verse wasn't there because they were what's the word? They didn't think Jesus was in the flesh. They thought he looked like he was in the flesh. He was a phantom. Why am I blanking out on the name of that? This is early heresy. And but they thought that Jesus on the cross. Jesus wasn't on the cross. It was he did some magic trick, and it was actually one of, I think, Judas or someone else. Anyways, but that's the Muslims. The Muslims adopt that idea, but they still believe in the same history that happened. They still believe someone went to a cross and got crucified, and they still think it's this God that this whole story comes out of. They're just interpreting it differently. So we're not actually getting ourselves to being there's our two different gods. All we're getting at here, all we've heard from my opening and your opening, is that Muslims interpret God differently than we do, but they claim to have the real Yahweh or Allah, but we actually have it. And because we have it, if they don't worship our God, they don't have the same God as us. So I'm actually more interested in the back and forth. I don't know how much, probably a bunch of time left.
But, 1 minute left.
1 minute left?
Yeah.
All right, that's it then.
Okay, cool. All right, Alex, your refutation, rebuttal against him. Again, this isn't crosstalk yet. Go ahead.
Yeah, I only have 2 slides for this one. So the first problem with Neil's worldview here is that he has no verification principle. So, like, for example, he says that, like, look, it's the creator, it's all powerful, it's transcendent, it's the same God, right? Well, Neil and I were both males. We're both of European ancestry. We both have beards. His might be a little better than mine. So I guess we're the same man then. Right? What Neil needs to show is some sort of verification principle that's like, look, at some point you're going to have to draw a line between these things, right? And I think there was a line that he said in his opening that did a lot of leeway for us. Like, it did a lot of work for me, honestly, where he said Christians go in a whole different direction. Yeah, that's a break in the historical chain. So in the philosophy of language, you have this guy Kripke who talks about like this historical inheritance theory that what a name refers to, the referent in a name undergoes like some sort of baptism event. It's linked to some sort of event in history. And what you saw in Neil's opening is that he keeps on linking this term God back to the God of Abraham, the God of Moses, the God of Isaac. But he's leaving out the rest of the history. Christians have a superseding, intervening event in the incarnation. They see that Jesus is God. So their referent shifts and has another essential attribute added to it, that Jesus is God. Now, the Muslims also have a referential shift in that in their baptism event for the term God, that shifts the term from avoiding the incarnation. The Quran, as I showed in my opening, denies the incarnation left and right. All over it denies the incarnation. It denies that Christ even died, and that he had the harrowing of Hades, that he conquered death, which is everything that Christians celebrate, right? You have a referential shift in the revelation to Muhammad, which I believe is supernatural, and as Neil alluded to, I do believe it is demonic, which is why I'm a Christian, but that's neither here nor there at this point. You have two distinct breaks in the historical chain which affix the referent of God, like who you're talking about with the term God. They refer to two different things because there are two different causes for what Christians believe God is and for what Muslims believe God is. So because there are two different causes between what they believe God is, those are different reference. It's a break in the historical inheritance causal chain. He makes broadly a historical anthropological argument. And he said that he appealed to the Ebionites, he appealed to Gnostics, he appealed to Docetists. They are not Christians. They are some heretical sect. We're talking about canonical Orthodox Christianity. There's a whole book on this by called the Heresy of Orthodoxy, where there's like this general view that within the early church, there were many different sects of Christianity. Within that, you see the emergence of a canonical Christianity. And that's the Christianity that we're talking about, the one that has affixed the referent of God to the incarnation of Christ. And throughout different councils has, again, specified what that referent is in the incarnation. If Muslims deny the incarnation, it is impossible for them to have the same referent that Christians have, because the referent that Christians have is based entirely on the incarnation. So you see, these terms have totally separate causes. And, you know, I did ask Neil a question, and I didn't expect him to actually get to that in his rebuttal. But look, if we went into a time machine, hypothetically, and I brought my Muslim friend with me, and Neil and myself and this Muslim friend, we went back into the past 33 AD, we saw Jesus of Nazareth on a cross outside of Jerusalem. I could say that is God. That is my referent. A Muslim could not say that is God. Those are two different referents for the term God. He used this analogy of the painting on the wall, that, you know, we're just looking at the same image, but we have different interpretations of what the image says. That presupposes the very thing in question. I'm saying there are two pictures. You have to demonstrate that it's one picture that we're looking at to begin with. Neil asked whether Jews and Muslims worship the same God as Christians. No. Jews worship a different God. The Jewish God is not a father eternally begetting the Son that is eternally spirating the Holy Spirit. There's no Trinity there. Jews worship a different God than Christians do. Muslims worship a different God than Christians do. You see this throughout the saints. Saint Cyprian of Carthage, in some of his letters, said that Marcion worshipped a different God than Christians do. Saint Seraphim Rose says that Jews and Muslims worship different gods than Christians do. In this book over here, Saint Saba said that he said that he damns or curses the God of the Muslims. Countless saints, countless Orthodox saints throughout history have had this position. This is not a controversial position. This is the canonical Christian Orthodox position. If you're not worshiping the Trinity, you're not worshiping God. And again, Neil brought up the concept of worship. Well, how is everybody supposed to know what proper worship is? Well, if you're not offering an atoning sacrifice, if you're not offering the Eucharist, you're not worshiping the Christian God. That's just how the Christian God receives worship. We have to evaluate each God within their system, right?
1 minute.
And take each one on their own terms. Neil also used the analogy of the car. Yet again, this presupposes that there is one car. Neil has to show a verification principle where he draws this line and show that we are in fact in the one car. I'm bringing that into question. I'm saying it's not one car. It's not one picture. It's two cars. It's two pictures that we're looking at here. Again, the Christian referent for God is in the incarnation. This is like a very simple argument. The Christian referent for God is in the incarnation. Muslims deny the incarnation. It's literally impossible for them to have the same referent that Christians do when they're talking about God. It's a break in the historical chain, and there's divergences. As Neil already admitted in his opening, Christians go in a whole different direction from Jews and Muslims. I would argue they stay in continuity, and the Jews and the Muslims are out of continuity. But I think this debate might be over from the outset here. Christians go in a whole different direction. That
All
closes
right,
my
time.
rebuttal.
Thank you so much. All right, Gnostic, you have 7 minutes yourself. I'm trying to refresh Soren really quick. Sorry.
No, but no,
No, I think it's crossed now.
Hold on. There we go. All right. Thank you. Also, you guys, if you want to ask them questions, make fun of either of them through a super chat, do that throughout the debate. I will save a time for super chats and questions at the end. Gnostic, go ahead.
Wait, it's not back and
It's
forth?
yeah,
Not,
it's
not yet. No, it's a rebuttal. Oh, it is a question. Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it was just
so,
one rebuttal each. I thought.
Got you. Okay, cool.
Right, is that right, Neil?
I thought so, yeah.
So yeah, you Neil, you have 15 minutes cross-examining Alex with questions.
Okay, I'll stay the time machine for your time. I did forget to answer that. Now, you mentioned the presupposing the car or the painting, but I can show you that there was one God worshipped in one location in the Temple of Jerusalem, right?
Yeah.
Just one of those? Yeah, there's just one of those. So there's one of those in question. You and I can talk about that one thing, and it doesn't matter what we interpret it as, there's still just one thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
My objection is that when you go down the line of historical continuity, you have divergences that are separate causes that create a different referent.
Right. So if it was so obvious that this God was the Trinity God with the Eucharist, why don't we find that in the Old Testament? And why did Jews just decide out of nowhere, we're no longer going to worship a Trinity, we're just going to do a worship one God from now on?
That's a good question. So in the Christian view, you do see the Old Testament in the Trinity. For example, Jude says that Jesus is the angel of the Lord that brought the Israelites out of Egypt. Yes. Yeah. So in the New Testament, Jude, he connects the angel of the Lord that brings the people out of Egypt in Exodus to Jesus. He says it's Jesus.
The question, because I'm talking about Old Testament scripture, Jewish scripture. Where's the Trinity? Where's the triad God there?
Yeah. So in Jude, you see the Christian interpretation of the Old Testament, and that this angel of the Lord figure, this theophanic figure throughout the Old Testament, the seen God, the one that like Moses went up the mountain and he saw God with the elders and they ate a meal. Jacob wrestled with God and he saw God.
Okay.
They are saying that that's God. Jesus. That's what the Christians are saying.
That's what the Christians are right because the Christians say so.
Well, if you're going to understand the referent of God in the Christian view, then you have to look at it from within a Christian's shoes, right? So
yeah, I understand that. But I'm saying that you're saying if they don't all worship this God exactly how we do, they're worshiping a different God. And I'm asking if what the Jewish God from the temple period, first or second temple period, completely not Trinitarian. There's no evidence at all they're worshiping triad God. And so what happened? Like, are we just not? Is it just no evidence of it? But they were doing it the whole time. Is that your argument?
Well, again, so if you look in like Isaiah 61, you're going to see that Yahweh has multiple different referents. So Yahweh refers to the speaker in Isaiah 61. It also refers to Yahweh in heaven that is going to pour out the spirit of Yahweh on the speaker, who is Yahweh. So you have three right there.
The angel of the Lord.
Well, it's Yahweh in Isaiah 61. It doesn't specify the angel of the Lord. Okay, so throughout the Old Testament, what's that?
We just have Yahweh. We don't have Jesus. We don't have the Logos.
So in Isaiah 61, it's Yahweh in heaven is pouring out the spirit of Yahweh on Yahweh the speaker. So it's three Yahwehs. There's like three different tenses there.
That's eisegesis. You're reading into that. That's so if what you said is true, then why aren't Jews Trinitarians?
Because they're heretics.
So they just randomly decided after 1,000 years of worshiping God, who they all knew was triad, just decided we're just gonna do some other thing now. That's what you think.
Well, so you're familiar with the work of Boyarin. I assume you're probably familiar with the work of Schaeffer and probably Siegel as well. So you have not a monolithic Judaism. Sure. There were some, do you see an emerging Trinitarianism, at least in Philo of Alexandria? Like you said, like not the whole idea is there, but at least the remnants. But that was the point of my opening, that like the Old Testament is progressive revelation. Right, so they don't have the fullness of the doctrine of the Trinity that's revealed in Christ. That's why you have Christians go and worship a Trinity.
All those pluralities of Judaism were all floating around, were they all worshiping different gods?
Well, after the incarnation, then yes, unless they're worshiping Jesus, they're worshiping a different God. That's why Jesus tells the Pharisees that you think you're worshiping God, but you don't acknowledge me, so your father is the devil. says you have to acknowledge me, and if you don't acknowledge me, you don't worship God.
Yeah, but why would the incarnation? Why would that be the event where all of a sudden now you have to be? If you're not following this exact interpretation, you're worshiping a different God. Why before that they're allowed to have different interpretations?
So if you're gonna, I don't know if you're familiar with like Kripke's view on it, but like if you want to take that lens, we can take multiple different lenses, but Christians would see that as like a baptism event, like a baptism of names, right? So the referent gets attached to Jesus at that point in the triune God in the Christian view. So after that, that's why you have this emergence of like canonical Christianity and orthodoxy, right? That anything outside of this view is just heretical. It's not actually worshiping the true God.
Are the Arians heretical? Arian Christians?
Yes.
So before the Nicene Creed, before the Council of Nicaea, there was all these different gods being worshipped by different people who claim to be Christians. Really?
Yeah.
That sounds absurd.
There were a ton of like Christians worshiping God. They
all think they're worshiping Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Even Arian, Trinity, who was a bishop. So what I'm trying to understand here. They all worship this one God who was worshipped in Jerusalem for 1,000 years. The temple gets destroyed. Now they're all scattered. Now they're all spread into these different cities, and there's different gospels floating around, different interpretations, and different. They put this all together, and it's not until 325 AD that there's one Christianity.
Oh yeah, I think I know what you're getting at here. Is that so? Intent does play a role, and I would say that like because Arius was obstinate and his intent was, to not repent, and he did not acknowledge that God is a father who eternally begets the son, like that in the deposition of Arius, if you read that document, the first thing that the synod condemns him for is not acknowledging that God is a father, right? He's normally well known for, there was a time when the son was not his little jingle. But really the number one concern of Alexander of Alexandria was that Arius didn't acknowledge God as a father. So when he refused to repent, I would say that's when the reference shift happened, right? So there is an issue of intent of the person who's like the worshiper. So I would say that like,
right.
Yeah.
In his intent, he thinks he's worshiping the God of the Bible, the God of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. Yeah. How do we know that Arius wasn't right and the church is wrong?
Because it's not the only factor, right? Well, within the Christian paradigm, the whole church would not be wrong, right? So the Holy Spirit guides the church, right? And St. Paul says that the church is the pillar and the ground of the truth, right? At least in the canonical Orthodox paradigm, right? So we would say because Arius refused to repent and submit to the church, that's when the reference shifted for him.
But how do you know which church? It's just begging the question. Like when the schism happens, you have more Christians in the West, I believe at the time, and it's a bigger church over there. How do you know they're not? Wouldn't they have the same perspective as we're the real church and they're the ones who are the heretics?
Well, I would say that like a Western Christian who is like very committed to the filioque and is aware of that, they also are not worshiping the right God.
But so it's all theological then. We're not actually talking about different gods. We're talking about people can think they're worshiping the same God, but if they don't have it your way, or I should say the Greek Orthodox way, then they're not worshiping the God.
Well, it's intent is a factor, but it's not the factor, right? So like if like somebody is very committed to the Muslim way of life, they understand Tawheed and something, fine, But if somebody doesn't understand the Muslim way of life, they do not sign on to Muslim doctrines. Like I wouldn't even call that person a Muslim in that case, because a Muslim is somebody that believes Muslim beliefs. In that case, I think God knows their heart. It might be possible that their veneration goes to God.
You have no way of determining any of this. It's just this is my theological worldview. Therefore, I believe this is the only way to worship the one true God. That's basically what you're saying.
Well, it's just based off of sense and reference theory, and also just like Leibniz's law, like I explained in my opening.
Okay, let's go with that. So you brought up an example. We're both two people with beards. So
indeed. Well, we are both one person.
Yeah, but
one person each.
We can go farther than that. We can say we can figure out our names. Maybe we have the same name. Maybe we're both Alex Soren. That still hasn't determined if we're the same person yet. We can go farther. How old are you? When were you born? Where were you born? All of those questions we can apply to this very, very God, and you always wind up back in Jerusalem, in the temple, where David built the temple and Solomon finished it, and he was worshipped all the way there till the end of 586. It gets destroyed for 70 years. They come back, and there's another couple hundred years. They're destroyed again, and then it scatters, and now we have Christianity and Judaism, and now Islam. So the whole thing about two people with different beards that falls apart. It's actually one guy who was born in one particular place with one particular name, who people have different opinions on. Maybe people have different opinions on this person, but it's still the same person.
Yeah. So you were saying we are the same person.
No, I'm saying if we took your analogy, you and I are two different people. I'm not debating that. I'm saying if I was one person and you, I don't know, you and I are different people. That's fine. I'm saying if we had one person
like
with
the
a
Christians
beard,
and Muslims worship two different gods.
I'm saying if we apply this analogy to Judaism, to Yahweh, it would come back as one particular God worshipped in one particular place. You and I are two different people. I'm not saying we're the same person. But if we had one person with a beard, we're trying to figure out who it is, we would ask the questions. Where is this person born? How old are they? What city did they grow up in? And then you would keep going until you ruled out every other option besides the one. The same applies to Yahweh. There's only one of them.
So in my opening, you'll see that I said that prior to the incarnation, it's kind of a loose referent, like whatever that term God refers to, because the full revelation had not been revealed yet, except to, in the Christian view, just specific people. So it's the incarnation that is the baptism of names event, using Kripke's lingo, that sets the referent for Christians. It's affixed on Christ at that point, right? At that point moving forward, to be a Christian, the Christian God is Jesus. You have to worship Jesus. Muslims do not worship Jesus. They do not worship the same God.
So did the Jews used to worship your God, and then because of the incarnation, now they all of a sudden their brains got scattered, and now they don't know which God they're worshiping?
Yeah, so one factor is intent of the people, right? Okay. Another factor is historical events and causes in the causal chain of what the term refers to, right? What the referent is of the term, right? So you don't have the full revelation of who the referent is for the term God, at least publicly revealed, until the incarnation. So it would just be like any Jew that, worships Yahweh and, follows whatever Judaism his local synod tells him to follow. He's got the right referent, right? After the incarnation, that causal event shifts the referent of who God is to Christ.
How do they all know this? If they're not all in Jerusalem,
they learn it over time
during the crucifixion. There's only a certain amount of Jews that were there. If we're assuming this all happened, let's assume it happened. How do they know this?
Well, that's why Jesus gave his apostles the Great Commission. He told them, "Go tell everybody and make disciples of all nations."
So they're for all their lives, they're told there's only one God, and when the Messiah comes, he will usher in the kingdom of heaven. And follow these laws: don't eat pork, don't eat shellfish, or honor the Sabbath. And then all of a sudden, these Christians come along and go, actually, that's all different now, because God came. He was a person for a little bit, got crucified, and now you can eat whatever you want. In fact, the laws don't really matter anymore. That type of thing. You think they're supposed to believe that? That to me, I would go, get the fuck out of my face.
Well, yeah, but I mean, incredulity isn't really going to change the fact that there's like a historical cause that shifts the referent of who God is, right? So, like I said, intent is a factor, and you see this in like John 4 with the Samaritan woman. Like, she did not know God, right? The Acts 17, the Athenians, where St. Paul says, like, I see here you have a monument, an idol to an unknown God. Let me tell you about him. Like, what you worshipped ignorantly, I'll now reveal him to you, right? So because they were living in ignorance, then it's not an active rejection of the referent, right? So there could be a possibility that their worship is actually going to the proper referent because of ignorance. Muslims are not in that same position. Islam actively rejects the divinity of Christ in the Quran, right? All over the place, it rejects that he is God. So again, like, yes, those Jews in the Second Temple period prior to the incarnation, they were ignorant. They didn't know. So intent plays a role. When you have a system that is actively denying the incarnation of Christ, then that's a different circumstance there. So Kripke also talks about this.
And
1 minute, Neil.
It seems like this is all come back to theological interpretation, and you're kind of acknowledging that there's only one God, and they're all trying to get at this God, but they all reject certain doctrines, and therefore they can't get directly to this God for some reason. It doesn't make a lot of sense because they're intentionally trying to worship this one God that we both agree on. There was only one of them in Jerusalem, God of Abraham, God of Ishmael, and Moses. But for some reason, because they don't have the right theology, they don't worship him.
So I think the biggest difference is that like you're seeing this in like one line, like God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, whatever. I'm seeing this as like everybody has different starting points, right? The Muslims have a different starting point. The Jews have a different starting point. The Christians have a different starting point, right? It's not, I would say the Christians are the only one with a continuous line. The Jews start from scratch when they reject the two powers doctrine. And the Muslims also start from scratch, in my opinion. And I think they would say that too. Like they would say, yeah, we don't believe what the Christians believe. We don't believe what the Muslims believe, right? That's what a Jew would say.
And
Yeah.
time.
That's fine.
All right, cool. Thank you for that cross-examination. Also, make sure if you guys want to ask him questions, any of these guys questions at the end, get your super chats in now. And Alex, you can start your cross-examination. I'm actually going to try to refresh you real quick. Just for a second. There we go. All right, Alex, you can start your 15-minute cross-exam now.
So, Neil, if we got into a time machine and we went back to Jerusalem circa 33 AD, right? It's hypothetical.
Yeah.
I bring my Muslim friend with me, right? We're all there. We're looking at, we see Jesus of Nazareth on a cross. And me as a Christian, like as I explained, I can look at him and say, that's God, right? That's my referent.
Mhm.
Can a Muslim say, looking at Jesus, that's God?
They would say that's Simon or something. They believe that he switched his body to someone else.
Right. So they would say no.
They would say no.
Okay. So how is that not a different referent?
Because they just don't think Jesus is God. They think Jesus was never incarnate God.
And Christians.
But which God was incarnate of Jesus' body? The God. The one God. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
God the Son. Yeah.
They don't think he was incarnate. That's it. It's still the same
yeah.
God.
But it's not, because God the Son was incarnate. We believe in distinct persons in the Trinity. And by denying his divinity, you see within the Christian system, it says that by denying the Son, you also deny the Father. I had that verse from 1 John up in my opening there. So if Jesus himself says, like, look, the only way to have knowledge of God is to believe in me, and the Muslims say, I don't believe in Jesus as God, how's that the same reference?
I'm not denying the interpretation that Christians have. I know what the church believes, that they don't believe. I'm not denying that the church thinks these things. I'm not denying that scripture in the New Testament alludes to these things. I'm saying outside of Christian theology, there's only one of there's literally objectively the same way that snow is white. There's one God of Abraham.
Okay, so Christians believe in an incarnate God?
Yes.
And Muslims believe in a God that cannot be incarnate?
I think so. I don't know if they say he cannot. I think he hasn't done it. He hasn't been.
I think for them it would be like shirk to say that
he
maybe incarnate, but
I'm not arguing for them, so I don't really care.
I know, but how is that the same God?
Because we're disagreeing on theological interpretations of this one God. So they don't believe this God comes into and becomes human or whatever. That's a theological interpretation. They still worship this one God that we're all both talking about right now.
Okay, so
if I go in the room and it's the God of Abraham.
If I go to the Amazon and I find a tribe that like worships the one God, right?
Yeah.
And they say he's like all powerful, he's the creator, he's whatever, he's the sole source of all things, but he's a pink elephant.
Mm-hmm.
Are they also worshiping the same God as the Muslims, Jews, and Christians?
Because it wasn't the God. It wasn't the God that was worshipped in Jerusalem. That was the God of Abraham and Joseph and Jacob and Isaac and Moses and later on Jesus. So it's not the same God. Those are very important traits. And you agree with me that those are traits that Muslims, Christians, and Jews all have.
What trait? That it's the God worshipped in the temple in Jerusalem?
Yes.
Would you say that's your verification principle?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why I answered it in my response.
Okay, then why is it the case that the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Jews in charge kick the Christians out of the temple?
Because they think they're heretics.
Why do they think they're heretics?
They think they're heretics for a whole bunch of reasons.
Is it because they think Jesus is God?
I don't think the Pharisees were ever told that Jesus is directly God. I think Son of God was something they heard, according to the text, if I'm not mistaken.
On John, the people accuse Jesus of saying that by saying he's the Son of God, he makes himself equal to God by claiming that he's his Father.
Yeah,
It's in John 5.
Fair enough.
Right.
Yeah.
So did the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the Jewish leaders, isn't it true that they kicked the Christians out of the temple because they worship Jesus as the Son of God?
I don't think the Pharisees thought they were worshiping Jesus. I don't think so. But even if we said yes to that, they're still heretics.
They kicked them out because they're worshiping a different God.
No, they're forced out because they're not worshiping the God correctly. The Pharisees would say God is never a man. It says in this verse, God is not the son of man. He's not a man. They would pull that out. And Christians would go, but we saw him do these miracles. We know he's God. And they would disagree over this stuff, but they still both think it's Yahweh.
All right, so according to Siegel and Boyarin and Schaefer, binitarianism was rampant already in Second Temple.
I wouldn't say rampant, but it's coming around. It's coming along pretty well.
Boyarin says that it's possible most Jews were binitarian by the first century.
Right? So my understanding is that's what was going on in Alexandria because of Platonism, because Plato had the one and then the second God.
Right, but even the Alexandrian Jews for the feast days, they would go back to Jerusalem for the feast days, and they would worship at the temple in Jerusalem. So you have hundreds of thousands of binitarian Jews there. They're not cast out of the temple. Why are the Christians cast out of the temple?
No, I don't think so. I think if they were explicit, like Philo was rejected by mainstream Judaism. Philo.
Well, I mean, after the fact, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, I don't think people were
because of his association with Christians.
I think with the bitheism thing, it was more of a philosophical interpretation of God being perfect and unmovable and stationary and completely sound. You know, like hesychia was the word, like completely sound, and that he includes a sort of logos or whatever, a second type of being to operate within the world. So I think it's still one God. It's still the same Yahweh. They don't even there's not even a name for this second God yet. It's just Yahweh. Just a second part, a second of being ascending from higher than.
So there are two distinct persons named Yahweh, like you see in Isaiah 61 in the Old Testament.
I mean, I think you can get away with interpreting that way. It's still Yahweh, though. Still the same God.
So I want to go back to that hypothetical in the beginning of, the time machine, and the Muslim and myself were standing there, and you were there too. We're looking at Jesus. So I say that this is God. The Muslim says this is not God, and you're still saying that we're talking about the same God?
Yes, because they don't believe that the God that's in question was in Jesus. It was actually Jesus.
Okay, so if I say that my God begets. He's a father who begets the son eternally. And the Muslims say, well, my God doesn't beget anybody.
Yeah.
That's the same God.
Yes, because the God that started off that statement, my God begets. So the nominative, God begets, which is the accusative, the subject and the object, right? God is the subject. That's the one we're talking about.
Okay, I would like to dig into that a little more with another hypothetical. Okay. It's like a hypothetical within a hypothetical. So let's say you and I meet at an airport in like Atlanta, whatever. Let's just pick a random place. And, oh, hey, Neil. Hey, Alex, what's up? How you doing? I'm really happy with John the plumber in Detroit. And we start talking about John the plumber in Detroit. Okay. He's got like good rates, same name, whatever. Eventually we find out that my John the plumber has like 8 or 9 kids. Your John the plumber has no kids. Mm-hmm. My John the plumber is like a 6'4" black guy and named John Kanye. And your John the plumber is like a 5'10" Polish guy named John Pizanski or whatever.
Different guys.
Okay. So,
but wait a minute.
If my God is a begetter who has a son, and the Muslim God does not beget anybody.
That's a theological argument that we can't necessarily objectively prove. You're making a theological argument that a person in history was begotten by God. We can both agree that.
Yes, that is the Christian verification principle.
So it's begging the question then. Why should I believe it? What if I don't think that Jesus was begotten by God?
It's not. It's just that's the Christian reference.
The only thing we can actually confirm is that there was a God worshipped in Jerusalem by Jews called Yahweh.
So would you concede that the Christian referent is that Father God that is begetting a son?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the Christian referent. That's
okay, and the Muslim referent is the God who doesn't beget anybody?
Yes.
That sounds to me like two different reference. That sounds like two gods.
Interpretations, though. They're still both talking about the same subject, which is this one God that we both agree was worshipped.
Okay, so at one point, the Roman general, I think it was a Greek general, Antiochus. I think he's the one you probably know about this already. Yes, and he worshipped, and he offered a pig on the altar in the temple in Jerusalem, and he worshipped Zeus.
Yeah,
is that the same God as Yahweh?
No. It's Zeus.
But I thought your verification principle was whether it's the God worshipped in the temple in Jerusalem.
No, that's Zeus being taken by a different person and with a different history. Zeus is worshipped by Greeks from Mount Olympus, and then bringing him to Jerusalem, and then removing Yahweh worship. He didn't say.
Okay, so Yahweh. Then whether or not a God is worshipped in the temple of Jerusalem is irrelevant, isn't it?
No, it's not. You can say they brought Zeus there for a period of time. It's Zeus now. We're talking about Yahweh worship that was represented by the Ark of the Covenant, who had a cloud of smoke that was hanging above there for 1,000 years.
Moses didn't have an Ark of the Covenant.
Well, I'm just saying.
I'm sorry, Abraham didn't have an Ark of the Covenant.
Okay, but Abraham was there before the time. I'm pointing to a thing we can verify. So
I know, but what I'm pointing out is that your verification principles don't work because I just pointed out an example that there's a different God worshipped in the temple in Jerusalem. There's a God worshipped without the Ark of the Covenant.
The priest, the Levites, Sadducees, whatever.
I'm supposed to be the one asking the questions.
No, but
if you have a clarification,
hold on. Alex, ask a direct question. He can answer.
Yeah. So, if there are multiple gods worshipped in the temple of Jerusalem, you conceded those are two gods.
Yes.
Abraham can worship Yahweh without an Ark of the Covenant. What is your verification principle?
Well, I can point to something in history that we can verify that there was one God worshipped in Jerusalem by this one priesthood who have a lineage that goes back to Aaron, and a kingdom with a king who goes back to David. We can point to that place. Abraham is before this, but they all say this is the God of Abraham.
Okay, so Christians consciously reject the Aaronic priesthood. I mean, they accept it within continuity, but they acknowledge that they have a new priesthood under a new covenant that's under the order of Melchizedek, right? So they integrate the Aaronic priesthood. Does that mean that Jews and Christians worship the same God?
They do. They have different interpretations on this God.
Do you think Arius after he refused to acknowledge God as a father, worshiped the same God as the canonical Christians?
Yes.
Do you think Marcion worshiped the same God as the Christians?
Marcion believed that Jesus had a different father than the God of the Jews.
Do you believe Marcion had a different God?
Actually, yes.
Okay.
He did.
Why did Marcion have a different God and Arius did not have a different God?
Because Marcion thought that Jesus was born from a different God who wasn't the God of the Old Testament. It wasn't Yahweh.
Okay, so Arius believed that God is not eternally a father.
Well, actually, I'm sorry. Let me clarify something. Marcion thought there was two gods presenting himself in
the demiurge and like the father. Yeah. So Arius rejected that God was a father eternally, right? He just said that like God, it's like an accidental property, whatever. It's like later on he became a father, right? He adopted the son. That was his initial mistake, that he didn't acknowledge that God is eternally a father. That's exactly what the Jews believe, and the Christians kicked him out of the church. Mm-hmm. Why would they do that if it's the same God?
But that's just like an adjective or something we describe God as father. That's not saying we're not changing the lineage or the principle or whatever this God is.
Okay, so I'm saying that Jews and Muslims did change the lineage.
What do you mean? How?
Because you have intervening, superseding events in history that for Christians it's the incarnation. The Jews rejected the incarnation, right? So John 1, he came to his own and he revealed himself to his own, the Jews, and they did not recognize him, right? So they rejected the incarnation. The Muslim also rejects the incarnation. Like throughout the Bible, they all reject this intervening, superseding cause in history.
So for you to be correct, it has a different lineage. Then you would have to say that the Jews in Jerusalem, the Levites and the priests, were always wrong, worshiping the wrong God. And then Jesus came and told them, you guys have been wrong the whole time. That's what I'm saying.
They did say, Jesus did say that they were wrong when they rejected him, right? So the reference became fixed at the incarnation, right? So the Muslims, they actively reject the incarnation, just like those Jews that Jesus said, your father is the devil because you don't acknowledge me. They are not worshiping God. You see how that's like the same thing?
John, whoever wrote John, is interpreting it.
Yes. That is the Christian belief.
You're just
that's the Christian reference,
right? But that's begging the question. You're just saying Christianity believes this, so therefore this is true.
Well, don't you have to look at it from Christianity's shoes to find out Christianity's referent?
What's that?
Isn't it true that you have to look at it from Christianity's shoes to find out Christianity's referent?
That we both can agree on. I mean, or not necessarily agree on, but you have to make an argument that proves that the Christian view is the one that's correct here.
Do you agree that the Quran retconned the Bible?
But you're just saying Christians believe do you agree that Jesus and Jews don't, so they worship a different God. That's your whole argument.
Do you agree that Muhammad retconned the Bible?
Retconned?
Retconned. Like he changed a lot of stuff, like reworded stuff, changed stories.
The Quran changes a few things, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it. All right, you guys. This is the fun part. Again, if you guys have questions for these guys, send your super chats. I'll read them at the end. We'll do a little hangout. We're not going to do an open panel or anything like that. Great debate so far, you guys. Now we're going to do an open 20 minutes. I'm really not going to intervene too much here, so it's all on you guys to work it out. I'm just going to stare at you.
Yeah. So I guess, like, where do you draw the line, man? Like,
very simple. I'm making an anthropological argument that we can verify that there is one God worshipped by people called Yahweh, called El, called Adonai, had different epithets, different titles, worshipped in one spot, and the temple gets destroyed in 70. People scatter. All of a sudden, you have different interpretations. You get Talmud Judaism, you get Christianity, you get Christianities in plural, and eventually Islam. And they're all trying to get at this God. People call it Yahwism. It's a term for all of these different traditions, Yahwism. They're all trying to get to this Yahweh. They all have different interpretations, and it's still the same God. Even if they're all heretics, even if I granted Orthodoxy figured it out, they're 100% correct. All the Orthodox going to heaven, everyone else is heretics. I would still say they're worshiping the same God, just in the wrong way.
I mean, if Orthodox Christians say it's not the same God and Muslims say it's not the same God,
what?
But you're saying it is.
No, Muslims say it's the same God. It's in the Quran.
Muslims worship Jesus?
No, they say that Jesus wasn't incarnate, wasn't the God incarnate. They still believe that it's the same God, though.
But the entailment is that
Catholics,
it's
Vatican II says it's the same God.
So yeah, Catholics are heretics. I'm not a Catholic, so I'm not going to try to.
You're making this thing claim that they all say they worship different gods. They're not saying that.
Yeah, well, I mean, just because Roman Catholics say it doesn't mean it's true.
No, you're right. I'm not saying that, but you just said.
I just think they're making the same error that you're making. That there's like, in my view, there's a clear break in the historical chain there, and like the referent for the term God gets reset in Christianity, right? So like John 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right? And then the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And like I said in John 18, like I think that verse kind of hits it on the head that like any knowledge you can have of God comes from Christ. That's the Christian view. So like nobody else can even have like knowledge of God. It's all just speculation in the Christian view.
Well, that's interesting you said that, because it says it throughout the Old Testament constantly. The King of Israel and his Redeemer, the Lord of hosts. I am the first, I am the last. Besides me, there is no God. Or that's not the one I was actually looking for. The one where he says, here, hold on one second. God is not a man that he should lie, son of man, he should change his mind. Hosea says, wait, where's the one about the creation? I think it's Isaiah. Thus says the Lord, your Redeemer, who formed you in the womb. I am the Lord who made all things. Then he says, after he says, who made all things, who alone stretched out the heavens, who alone, not with this logos, who spread out the earth by myself, it says.
Yeah, so the term in that verse is Lord over there is going to have all lowercase capital letters. It's going to be referring to Yahweh. Yeah. It's like the covenantal.
Yeah, but in Hebrew it's Yahweh.
Yeah, it's going to be Yahweh. So Yahweh, as I said, is meant to refer to a bunch of different people. And in John 1, you see that John the Baptist refers to Jesus as Yahweh because he's quoting to Isaiah 40, saying that, look, there's a voice in the wilderness, make clear the way of the Lord. The word Lord there refers to Yahweh. John is calling Jesus Yahweh in John 1.
I don't think he's saying that. I'm saying here comes.
Then why is he quoting Isaiah that the passage that says Yahweh?
Yeah, because he's, from my understanding, and we can disagree. We're going to disagree on this. John the Baptist is saying, "Make way of the way of the Lord," as in, like, this is God's will playing out right in front of me.
Okay, so a few verses later, he says that this one that is coming, Jesus, he's greater than me because he existed before me.
Yeah.
How is that possible when John was born first?
Well, again, this is John's Christology that we're talking about here. So you can appeal to Christianity all you want, but I'm saying there are conflicting passages in Isaiah, for example, that contradict this. That's why, for example, today Jews aren't Trinitarian.
And so I'm appealing to Christianity because we are discussing whether Christians and Muslims worship the same God. Like, that's going to entail the Christian view of God.
Which is why I'm also appealing and pointing to Judaism and Islam, because they have different things that contradict what you're saying.
Yes, that's my point too.
Right. You're saying they have to worship the God the same way as you, have the same theological interpretation, or somehow becomes a different God. But, like, it's still the same God. Yeah. I think you realize that.
No, we saw the Orthodox Church set certain guidelines, like certain borders, parameters. Like, this is canonical Christianity, right? I'm not talking about like some like Pastor Billy Joe Bob that went and started his own church like down the road, right? Canonical Christianity, like people in continuity with the early Christians, right? So they set down boundaries and parameters. One of those boundaries and parameters is that if you do not acknowledge that God is a Father eternally, and eternally begetting the Son, eternally proceeding the Spirit, you are not a Christian. You have to acknowledge this doctrine of God. If you do not, then you are not a Christian. You are worshiping some other God.
That's like saying, if you don't think that this painting on the wall is, and you just name off a bunch of things that you think about the painting, then you don't actually think that's a painting there. You think it's something else. But I'm literally looking at it and going, no, it's still a painting. I can see it right there. That's literally what you're doing here.
So what we're saying is that, yeah, that's what the Christians are doing. The Jews went and made another painting. The Muslims went and made another painting. They're looking at different paintings. We're the ones looking at the same painting. So again, like that analogy kind of just presupposes your conclusion there. I guess like my argument is that it's three different paintings because they have different causal effects, right? There are different causes for when the referent gets stuck to the term God.
How do you know you're not the ones that made a new painting then, if you want to use that analogy?
As long as it's three paintings, then we're agreeing that it's three different gods, right? So one thing is that like the incarnation is what sets the painting for Christians. That Midrashic period is like, everybody knows that like rabbinical Judaism was set between like the 200s and 400s when they were like putting together the Mishnah, the Gemara, and yeah, they claim continuity with the Pharisees. But really, they got rid of a lot of those doctrines that associated them with Christians, right? So like the two powers doctrine, they dropped that and declared that to be heresy throughout different writings in the Midrash and whatnot. Muslims later, they have a different causal event, right? It's the revelation to Muhammad, which is, it's not only discontinuous with the Bible, it retcons the Bible. It says it's wrong about many things. Not only does it not acknowledge the incarnation, it says the incarnation is wrong. Like it explicitly rejects these things. So at that point, like, I don't know how much more clear they can be that like we have different revelation. We're worshiping different gods.
Okay, so do Baptists or evangelicals who don't do Eucharist, because they don't, and I'm not making them hypothetical, that's true, most Baptists, are they worshiping a different God?
I would say that they are not worshiping God at all. I would say that they are venerating God really hard. And depending on the amount of knowledge that they have,
depending the same God, though.
Worship is a sacrifice, right? So I would just say, just like mechanically, because there's no sacrifice, they're not worshiping.
So they're doing it wrong, but it's still the same God.
Aside from it, okay, now that's aside from hitting the right referent. Now, whether or not they're hitting the right referent, I would say that depends on how much they know and assent to the ideas of like Baptist or evangelical theology, right? So if somebody doesn't know anything about Baptist or evangelical theology, it's possible that they could be hitting the right referent. If they are wholesale, like bought into Baptist and evangelical theology, then I would say, no, they're worshiping a different God.
Wait, so someone who's just dumb and goes to Baptist church is fine?
Well, Roman Catholics call it invincible ignorance. I would say that there's like some element of that in Orthodoxy. You know, it's not the exact same doctrine, but it's like a useful term, right? So intent is it is a factor. I think, and Kripke acknowledges this too. Like if you're referring to the referent attached to the name, you have to actually be meaning to hit the reference attached to the name.
But then you could say the same thing about Muslims, though, is that they don't have these reverence, right? Correct. They have different reverence, but they are intentionally trying to worship the God who was worshipped in Jerusalem, who calls himself the God of Abraham and Moses and Jacob, and that's what the Quran literally says. But you're saying because they don't believe that Jesus was incarnate or God was incarnate in Jesus, and don't have a communion or don't have a Eucharist, then they're just not worshiping anything. Then is what you're just saying.
Well, I would just say they're not really Muslims then if they don't believe Muslim doctrines.
No, I'm saying they believe Muslim doctrines, but wouldn't that be, how is that different than the Baptist who just doesn't have a Eucharist?
Because they don't know anything.
Right, but all we're doing is going a couple more steps deeper and saying not only do they have a Eucharist, they don't believe Jesus was God incarnate. It's just another step deeper into heresy.
Yes, that changes their intent. That is a material fact, right? So they have to believe that Jesus is divine, right? And like for me, for an Orthodox Christian, the verification principle would be the Eucharist. Like the babushka in an Orthodox parish, she doesn't understand the creed or the filioque or like absolute divine simplicity or actus. She doesn't know any of this stuff. But because she's partaking in the Eucharist, I can say we believe the same things, me and this babushka in the Orthodox parish, right? So like similarly, people like that are ignorant. It's possible that they might be hitting the right referent. But if you're a good Muslim and you actually believe Muslim things, there's no way you're hitting the right referent. It's impossible.
But it's still not answering the question. We're not talking about different gods. We're talking about different interpretations and different ways of worshiping. But you still haven't brought forth to me.
Okay, in Christianity, our God, you can eat our God in the Eucharist.
I know
you can eat God. Muslims think that's shirk. Is that enough to say those are different gods? That like it's literally like the worst sin possible in Islam?
That doesn't make it a different God. It just means these people disagree on how to worship God.
So a Muslim can be committing shirk and they're still hitting the Muslim God.
Well, the Muslim God is the same God as the Christian God, as I argue.
So then it follows a Muslim can be committing shirk and still hitting the Muslim God as a referent, correct?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
So a Muslim can be committing shirk and still hitting the Muslim God as a referent, correct?
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, that seems like pretty far down the rabbit hole.
I just think we're talking about heresy and being wrong. Like, it's like you and we can be watching a football game, and there's two football teams there.
Okay,
and
so
you can say one team sucks, one team's good. We disagree on what's going on. You think that team's going to win. I think this team's going to win. But we're still watching the same football game.
Okay,
That's
so I am eating God in the Eucharist. I am eating Jesus' body and blood in the Eucharist. Okay, this deified flesh and his deified blood.
I think you are.
I'm worshiping the Muslim God when I'm doing that?
No, not you.
So they're different gods.
No, I'm saying you think you're worshiping the Christian God, but I'm saying it's the same God as the Muslim God.
So then by eating the Eucharist, the body and blood of Jesus, I'm communing with the Muslim God.
Essentially, you're worshiping the same God that Muslims worship.
Okay, so that is the exact opposite of what St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians when he says that you are either partaking of the table of the Lord or you are partaking of the table of demons. Like again, that view is explicitly rejected by the Bible.
Christian doctrine and saying it's true because it says so.
Yes, because Christian doctrine says it's a different God.
Yeah, I understand you believe this, and that your church believes this, and that your scripture has this in the New Testament. But I'm like, again, for the 10th time, this is an anthropological argument pointing to a place and time where there's one singular God who's worshipped in this one singular place, who has all these interpretations based on him now.
Okay, so the Christians say that I would be
agree on that, though, right?
communing at a table with demons. The Muslims say that I would be committing shirk. I'm still worshiping the same Muslim Christian God?
Yes.
I think
You
that's a
agree.
pretty wild concession,
You at
man.
least
Like,
There's one point that there is one particular God called Yahweh, Adonai, El, Elohim, whatever. There's a whole bunch of epithets and names. Worshipped in Jerusalem by a priest called Levites until 70 AD. And that particular God is the God that all these religions, Abrahamic religions, are based off of.
yeah, the reference for the term God prior
And
to
that's
the
not a reference.
incarnation was a loose reference.
I didn't ask you for that, though.
So yes, their
Yes.
intent could be
The same
different, and they could be worshiping the same God.
That's
The
debate over.
verification principle for
debate over.
Christians is the incarnation,
But you disagreed it's the same God.
because there's
You
a
just
causal
disagree on the
event that sets
interpretation.
the referent.
But it's still this. We could talk.
Right, so-
I agree. There's different reference. I agree with that.
So
That doesn't get us to different gods.
that means different gods if
No,
there's
it doesn't.
different reference.
No, it doesn't.
So in the line of historical continuity, like prior to the incarnation, it was a loose referent. What Christians are saying is that at the incarnation,
I don't
the
think
reference
so.
becomes fixed on Christ.
No, it was fixed before Christ. It was fixed in the temple. You had to go to take part in the past what's it called, the
Yeah, whatever the feast
Passover.
days, the Passover.
Yeah, you had to go to the
Feast of
temple to be
Booths,
part of the Passover.
whatever. Yeah,
if you
the
wanted to have your
Pentecost.
sins, you wanted to have your sins removed, you had to go to Yom Kippur.
5
It
minutes.
has a way of cleaning your sins with the scapegoat, Azazel, in Leviticus. So there was fixed. It was a fixed. Yeah, you had synagogues in different cities, but they all sent their money to Jerusalem. It was a Jerusalem-based religion.
Yeah, but at the same time, they could be binatarian. They could have like a flat monotheism.
Those
They
are all
could believe in
philosophical.
multiple powers in heaven, and that would still be fine. They would still be accepted at the
Yes.
temple. It was
Those are all
Christians that
philosophical.
were kicked out of the temple because they acknowledged Jesus as
I don't-
God.
I don't think you're right about them being accepted in the temple with bitheism. I think those are philosophical movements that happen outside of Jerusalem. But if you can point to a source that says they were accepted in the temple, I'd be willing to listen to you. But I don't think that's true. It was very fixed. It was very rigid. It was very fixed. It was Jerusalem. That was it.
I mean, wouldn't you hear about like 300,000 Alexandrians not being allowed to commune at the temple, like around Jesus's time? Like you have Christians from all over the place, like that are or not Christians. I'm sorry. You have the Jewish diaspora coming from all over the place, from Babylonia, from Italy, from Greece, from North Africa. They're all coming to Jerusalem, from Turkey, from Syria. They're all coming to Jerusalem.
Talking
All of them
Acts?
believe. What's that?
Talking about in the book of Acts?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's happened or not.
Yeah.
I
Well,
know, I'm
we
serious,
have
but
a historical
I don't know.
witness in the book of Acts, right?
The book of Acts is like a certain type of genre. It's not historical, but whatever.
Well, regardless, it's not really disputed that you have a Jewish diaspora all over the place. All of them believe different things. They all went to Jerusalem and they all offered sacrifices in the temple. You have anything showing that they were like not allowed to worship in the temple? Like every source that we have, you have a bunch of Jews that came from all over the place in Jerusalem to worship. They all believe different things and they all offered sacrifices in the temple.
Yeah. I'm not saying they weren't allowed to go to the temple. I'm saying that their ideas of bitheism were not accepted as like Judaism at the time period.
So this
Those
is
are
the
more
whole thing with
philosophical
like
movements.
this is the whole thing with Siegel. He's saying that like it was only in like the 200s that this started getting rejected because it associated these Jews with Christians.
That might be the case. I'm not. It's one scholar's opinion. It might be the case.
Well, and Schaeffer and Boyarin agree.
Well, I'm just saying the Talmud sources are 200 AD later anyway. So how do we know if that's even the case? We only have sources from Jews after 200 anyway. We don't really know what they thought unless we read Josephus. Josephus doesn't tell us much about that. You know, I'm just saying.
Yeah,
I don't know. What I'm saying is I don't know what the interpretation of bitheism was by the temple priest, the Sadducees, for example. I think they're pretty monistic in their world.
But it's like not really a controversial proposition that I'm making because like Memra theology was all over the Palestinian Targums. That's like virtually identical to Philo's Logos theology.
Yes,
that was all over the Palestinian Targums.
Yeah,
Like Jews were bitheists.
No, well, okay. Yeah, I agree. Like Philo, and there's a bunch of other people like Philo who thought that there was a second God that was God's active principle in the cosmos. But they don't think it's like they don't think it's a different. They don't think there's like two different. Like they think it's still Yahweh's creation or Yahweh's will.
All right, but what I'm saying is that Christians do. They fix their referent on God, on Jesus as God, right? So Christians say Jesus is God. Muslims say that Jesus is not God. Those are different gods.
But either way, you still have Yahweh as this singular God who is the origin of this whole entire theology.
Well, I mean, I don't want to bring you back to your debate with Jay, but I mean, it's one and many with Yahweh, right? It's
one and
I could pull up a piece of paper right now and write the number 3 on it.
No, I agree with that. I agree with
the
what
Jews think it's a flat monotheism.
It's still that one God. It's what you just walked into what I'm saying.
Yeah, but that's whether he is one or whether he's one and many, that's a material difference. That's like an essential attribute. Those are different gods.
That's fine. That's a theological interpretation. And what I'm saying is, even if I said that God was a triad, or he's not, he's a dyad, or he's a singular God, it's still the same God, Yahweh, or Adonai, or whatever you want to call him, still the same God with the same history from the same location. So you can't get out of that.
So if they're saying my God was incarnate, my God has a mom, my God died, my God was born, my God got hungry, my God slept, my God hung on a cross, my God harrowed Hades, my God rose from the dead, and Muslims reject all of those things.
Yes.
Don't you reach a certain point where it's like, maybe we're talking about two different gods here, you know?
They're only saying that didn't happen.
All right, and that's time, you guys. Huh? All right, that's a great exchange. That's 20 minutes. We're going to complete with the closing because Neil went first with an opener. We're going to have Alex go first with the closer, and you'll get the last word, Gnostic Informant. And then we'll do questions. And before questions, I have 2 questions for each of the interlocutors. The closing statement, starting with Alex, can start now.
Yeah. So again, the point at issue for tonight's debate was whether Christians and Muslims worship the same God. I think I showed in my opening that basically just comparing essential attributes, you see that these are 2 different gods. Now, Neil's counter to that is like, okay, well, maybe they're just describing 2 different things. Well, I don't think you can get away with just describing 2 different things when you're talking about essential attributes to somebody, right? But again, I went down that historical line of continuity to see if there is a similar historical inheritance, and there's not. There are breaks in the historical chain. For Christians, the incarnation is the fulfillment of all of those promises in the Old Testament. For Orthodox canonical Christians, we eat God on Sunday in the Eucharist. We offer him a sacrifice in true worship. Our God became incarnate. Our God died on a cross, and he picked up his life again after harrowing Hades. Muslims reject all of those things. And for Christians, those are all essential to what God is. Now, Neil would say, okay, but these are differences in theology. They're not only differences in theology. They're divergences in the historical inheritance of the term God. They are reference-shifting essential attributes, right? So again, the Second Temple period was not monolithic. There were many different views in the Second Temple period, and it wasn't really until later that Jews really hammered down on this idea. And you see this in my slides, in Boyarin, in Schaeffer, in Siegel. They all agree on this, that in the Second Temple period, even for the years following, Judaism did not have really an established doctrine of God until like the 200s, 300s, 400s, right? So there was a plurality. It was a loose referent, the term God, and for Christians, it became fixed at the incarnation. Now, Muslims expressly deny the incarnation. It's an intervening cause that supersedes everything else. The Muslims retcon many things in the Bible. I showed them on my slides and on the chart that, like, look, in the Bible, they say Aaron participated in the golden calf incident. Aaron tries to stop the golden calf incident. And I think the biggest one is that in the Bible, there is a sacrificial system that has an atoning significance, one that you do not see in the Quran at all or in Islam. Now, they do have one big sacrifice that's coming up in a few weeks here, but this is a symbolic sacrifice. It doesn't actually have any atoning significance to it. It's just, you know, almsgiving and self-reflection. It doesn't actually have an atoning effect on the offerer. So even if for the sake of argument, I concede that the referent is the same for Muslims and Christians, which again, it's not because of those historical breaks in the chain of inheritance. Muslims are not even worshiping God. They're just honoring or venerating really hard. It's the same type of honor that a Christian would give to any saint in prayers and prostrations. But unless you're giving a sacrifice, an atoning sacrifice, you're not even actually worshiping the true God. Now, I like Neil, very mild-mannered, very nice guy. I just think he's wrong on this one, honestly. I think that if you look at the historical inheritance and the historical continuity, you see that there are various breaks in the historical chain, and it's not like there's one line and everybody's branching off this one line and they have a common inheritance, right? Like, no, there are complete breaks and restarts for Christians, for Jews, for Muslims. At least from a Jewish perspective, they would see Christians as a complete break, right? In our view, we see it as a perfect line of continuity that is fulfilled in Christ. Just look through my notes here. Yeah, so the historical argument is like pretty simple. Like the incarnation fixes the referent of the term God for Christians. If you cannot accept that, you are not hitting the same referent as Christians. That's like the bare minimum. Muslims deny the incarnation. It is literally impossible for them to hit the same referent as God. So they are worshiping two gods.
1 minute.
Again, Surah 112.3 expressly denies that God has any sons, that God begets or is begotten. So when you have an explicit rejection like that, of course, that would amount to a break in the chain again, where you have an established doctrine and an established historical event that fixes the name onto the referent. You have an explicit rejection. Again, that's a break in the chain of who God is, as in his identity. So again, there is no way that they're worshiping the same God. They disagree on the most fundamental level on essential attributes. Not only that, there are breaks in historical inheritance. Now, again, I would encourage everybody who's watching to go to your closest divine liturgy. Neil, I don't know if you've ever been. I would encourage you to check it out at least once. Might be cool. You know, a bit different from the typical, evangelical or maybe even like nowadays Catholic Novus Ordo type of service. But yeah, thanks everybody for watching. Appreciate you. I can't wait to get through your super chats. God bless.
All right, thanks, Alex. And Gnostic, you can do your 5-minute closing. Starts when you talk.
I definitely enjoyed this debate. I like the topic a lot. Alex is a good guy. I enjoyed it. He did good. I thought this would be a really much easier debate to do, but Alex was tough, man. I still think whether we disagree on reverence or what the theological interpretation or how to worship or who has the Eucharist or who believes in the Trinity is all secondary to the anthropological arguments that I'm making, which is things that we could know, going from the known to the unknown and moving outward. And we know that there was a God worship in Jerusalem who's known as Yahweh, Adonai, Elohim, Allah. And this God was worshipped by a particular priesthood that was there for about 1,000 years. And after 70 AD, the temple was destroyed and they went different directions. And now we have all these different sects and denominations. You have Christianity, you have Judaism, you have Islam, but they all even claim to worship the God of Abraham, of Jacob, of Isaac, of Noah, of Moses. The Quran even says, and Jesus. I can understand the perspective, the Orthodox perspective of saying our God who's incarnate, who's Jesus in the flesh. They don't believe that. But I still think that you can reject those things and still worship the same God who is the God who, preceding that event, did X, Y, Z. I actually, ironically, agree with Vatican II, and even the Catholic Church. They don't say that Muslims are saved or going, whatever, that they believe in God, therefore they're saved. They just think they worship the same God as us, but they're in error and they should come get Eucharist to get saved. So I think that is a clear perspective, an honest anthropological view of what this God is, who this God is, the history of this God, the influence it's had on Western civilization. I keep going back to an analogy of like a painting, for example. Two people looking at the same exact painting, and let's say that painting existed for 1,000 years it's a historical valuable, and two people are looking at it going, no, I think that's actually blue. That's not blue. That's teal. I think it's purple. That's still the same painting, but they have different ideas of the painting. It still has the same history. It still came from the same location. It's still made by the same painter. And I apply that to Christianity and Judaism and Islam, because we can trace back the history of this God to a specific location, even before this location, as Alex pointed out. It goes back even before the temple. Abraham supposedly was the first person after the flood, or after Noah, I guess, to be shown who this God was, and brings it to the West. Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is that's the God we're talking. That's the God in question. People can disagree on was he incarnate? Did he become Jesus in the flesh? Was he hanging on a cross? Does he have a triadic nature? Is he a Trinity? All that stuff comes secondary to the point is there is this one God, and it's this one God of Abraham. And I think that's solid. I think there's no way you can argue against that, even if you think these people are in error and they don't worship the same way as me. They don't have the same knowledge as we do. They don't have the same churches as we do, and the same priesthood as we do. But still, they still believe that they have the true way to get to the God of Abraham. So they are essentially worshiping the same God, even if it's the wrong way to do it. So, what was I going to say?
1 minute.
Yeah, like I said, it's not just a matter of, they're both called God and they both are the supreme God, and therefore anyone who claims to have a supreme God worship this God. No, I'm being very particular about this. Specific place, specific time, specific attributes that go back to a specific location. So,
all right. Thanks, you guys. All right, great debate, you guys. Really good and clean. I'm going to open up I'm going to look through the super chats, but beforehand, I want to personally ask a couple of questions, being that I'm interested in both of these things. First, I'll start with Alex. Alex, would you say that like the current Jews, which we wouldn't say are the same Jews before the 70 AD, today, when they like usher in their new Messiah because they rejected Christ the first time, are they going to say that person is also God? Do they get to at least two-person God if that happens?
I don't think so. I've seen some Unitarians talk about how like maybe, but for Jews, I don't think that they would. They might say that he has some like divine authority, but it would be more like an energy. Yeah,
they don't believe that God and the Messiah are the same.
Okay, so it's like so it kind of re-kicks off Christology from the original history, right? It'll just do it again if that happens. They'll be like, what is this? Is AI God? Or whatever they usher in, they'll have the same type of arguments for the ontology of their new ushered in Messiah, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The other question is a little more nuanced here, is that if we could, because I take your position, I say, these are not the same reference. But for people like Catholics, coincidentally, does the Orthodox position almost take a V2 position on Catholics then, or do we straight out say no, they're actually not worshiping the same God, or is there some sort of more allowance to the referent being closer to the target?
Yeah, so this is like what I was trying to explain earlier, is that I think there's like a sliding scale of it to where like God is defined by like the councils, and they change the definition of God. So like, I think the more somebody is aware and committed to it, like the more knowledge that they have of it, it cannot be the same God. I think like an ignorant Catholic, again, I think it would be the same God. But I think like, and of course, like the Roman Catholic position is a lot closer to ours, so they would need like a lot more specialized knowledge than like a Muslim would, like just outright denying the divinity of Christ. But I think they get really close in a lot of things, right? They believe in like a form of a mutilated Trinity. They believe in the divinity of Christ. So I think a lot of that stuff is there. But like if they really sign on to that stuff of, the filioque and ignoring the essence energies distinction, I think that's like a big problem. But then like those are high level theology points.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting one.
And it's like a sliding scale of ignorance and knowledge. Like the more knowledge you have of a wrong view, and the more you sign on to it, the more likely it is you're like missing the reference.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. And then Neil, my question to you is if similar to Alex's, pitch about having the same mechanic or whatever he said, I use the doctor analogy similar. If you and I met, at a bar and we're chatting up and, we're talking about our health because we're in our 40s and it sucks. And you're like, dude, I have a great doctor. And you say, oh, he's the greatest, the truest, best doctor in New York City. And I go, I've heard that phrase before. That's weird. You said that. I have that too. Are you talking about my doctor? And you're like, yeah, dude, the greatest, truest, best doctor in New York City. My question to you is more of a methodological question. How is it we would determine whether or not we're talking about the same doctor?
Well, we'd say, where's the address of this doctor? Is it the same address?
Okay, is the address of a doctor or is the address of a person?
The person is the doctor, so it's the person. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not the address of any doctor, right?
No, we're trying to find out we have the same doctor. So you say this doctor's on 204 Main Street. Right. Well, mine is
right,
too. Is it the same doctor?
It doesn't say doctor, right, on the address. It says Dr. Peterson, Dr. something, right?
Peterson.
So we're actually would you agree that the way in which we would determine we actually have the same doctor isn't by appealing to the title of doctor that they share, but rather the person that they are?
Yes, that's what I'm saying about God too. We wouldn't agree. It wouldn't be about we both think he's the true God, the best doctor, or if you think he has good hair, we would have to go, is it the doctor in this location right here?
Okay, so if it's not a matter of the concept or the category, in this case, doctor would be equivalent to God of Abraham. The only way for us to know if we're talking about the same referent when we use the title God of Abraham is, like in the doctor scenario, is to find out who the person we're referring to, right?
Yes.
Okay, and if Muslims reject the person of Christ as God, we would find out that they... Wait, what? No, is Christ a person or not?
Well, is God a person?
Well, God, that's what we're discussing. Is God the title in your argument, or is God the person?
Well, now you're getting into what this doctor does or doesn't do. We're just trying to find out if it's the same doctor first.
Yeah, and that's the only way to do that from your concession is to find out who the person is.
Yes,
and if Muslims reject the person of Christ as the doctor, as God in this case, then we're not talking about the same referent, but we might be using the same term doctor in this case.
Wait a minute though. This is actually doesn't help you because you can sit there and go, I think he's this person, but we can go to the doctor's office and find out, actually, you had his name wrong. This is Dr. Peterson.
That's even in my
Dr.
favor.
Peters.
Yeah.
Oh, my bad.
Favor. Yeah. That's in my favor. If let's say they share the same name, let's say they share this, they share the same glasses and hair. They literally look like clones of each other. Even if that's the case, like Alex said in his opening, you can't violate the law of identity. One, it's either the same person or it's not, right? Is that fair? It's either the same person or it's not. Okay. So that's all I'm saying is, like, if the methodology from your own admission is to determine whether or not the referent is the same person, not the same title, the same person,
right?
We have to examine the person of God. If Muslims reject the person of God being Father, Triune, Spirit, Son, they could die, right? This kind of thing. Then they're really not pointing to the same referent. They're only pointing to the same. They're only using the same reference.
But that's like saying, oh my God, my doctor does surgery. He gives out pills. And then you come to find out you were just wrong about that. He doesn't do any of those things. You just thought he did those things, but it's still the same doctor that we're going to.
Well, no, we're back to the who. If we know if it's the same, the only way to know it's the same doctor, and I'll just end with this, and we'll get into super chats. The only way to know it's the same doctor is to find out who the doctor is. Now, Christians have a who God is. Who. There's a who-ness to God. The who-ness is the person. The whatness is the God, the divinity of it. And so that's the key distinction that I kind of heard throughout the debate that was important to tackle, which is if we can't figure that out even in the created world, if we can't figure out if we're talking about the same doctor or teacher or whoever we're talking about, that the who-ness is a necessary component of when we're referring to God, and Muslims fundamentally reject the who-ness of God that the Christians hold.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, let's get into super chats. Also, great job, you guys. You guys did a really fantastic debate, by the way. I really enjoyed
I
it.
had a lot of fun, man.
My pleasure.
All right, we're gonna get into this stuff right now. A lot of memberships. Thank you so much, you guys. Soren, Eagles go. I'm gonna try to find questions directly. Let me see. So if I was worshiping an ant and I thought in your head, they say, thought it was the same God as Christians, does that make the ant the same God, Gnostic Neil?
I'm sorry. Repeat that one more time. I'm sorry.
I'll bring it up. So if someone was worshiping an ant and they thought in their head, holy, that it was the same God as the Christians worship, does that make it the same God? Okay, and what would be the distinction you would make?
Because that ant wasn't, as I said this, I'm sorry, I'm repetitive now. Was that ant literally the God that was worshipped by the Levite priests in Jerusalem or Moses or Abraham? No.
Okay. Even if they said it was, if they thought it was?
Well, then they think they are, but they think they're worshiping that God.
Okay.
If they define that, if they literally were like, this ant is the God of Abraham and whatever, then they just think they're worshiping that God.
I would say my problem with that verification principle is that, like, if Jews rebuilt the temple today and started offering sacrifices on the altar, from a Christian perspective, and they're not worshiping the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, like, we would still say they're missing the referent, right? So it's like the proper address is Jesus, right? It's not the from the Christian perspective, it's not the temple in Jerusalem.
I get that.
Okay, G, this is for you, Neil. You're getting caught up on which tradition is correct, quote, correct, about their interpretation. Totally different debate than whether or not they worship the same God. Can you acknowledge the difference? You get that? Like, they're saying that we're not talking about which one's true. We're talking about whether they're pointing to the same referent.
That's what I was trying to argue the whole time.
Okay. According to scripture, okay, wait, I'm looking for questions here. Neil has been to liturgy. He's been to Pascha, actually.
Yeah, last year I went to Easter in crazy. I'll never forget it. Yeah, they had the fire. They brought the fire from Jerusalem to my church that I was at. It was an 11th century church that I was inside.
That's tight.
Yeah.
Lucky.
I introduced the Jimbo to my friend Steven from Crossbow.
Yeah, Steven's cool.
So, I'll introduce you. He's the one who brought me in.
That's awesome.
Nice. To Neil,
by the way, right behind me. That's from.
He's hanging out with you.
That's an icon right there.
Oh, you got an
nice.
icon. Yeah. Beautiful. Nice, Neil. To Neil, if I say I love my mom, quote, and you say I love my mom, do we both love the same woman?
No.
Okay. Neil,
I was clear on that. I said it's not about the title of God. It's about the actual anthropological history of this God.
Okay. Can someone intend to worship one true God and fail to do it? Like, they intend to worship the true God, but they fail. Can they do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see. Neil, Hayden asks, thank you so much, Hayden. How do you identify the anthropomorphic qualities of each God in question without relying on the divine texts and their interpretations, which are fundamentally theological? This points to, like, throughout the debate, you said, no, that you're talking about theology. And Alex would say, of course, I'm talking about theology. We're talking about our theological views on text, on praxis, on worship. So his question is, again, how would you identify the anthropomorphic qualities of each God in question without relying on the texts and their interpretations?
It's a fair question, and I was trying not to just appeal to one particular source over others, but I do try to not ignore, but I tried to weed out the subjective, opinionated theological stuff in the Quran, for example, or the New Testament. The Old Testament, though, precedes those things, so it's a better source. It's not biased towards either or. It's just giving us an origin. So I kind of appealed more to, like, the Old Testament text that talk about the temple, stuff like that.
Okay.
There's also
If
other
I-
ways too, archaeology and outside secondary sources of the Bible that talk about Jerusalem and stuff like that.
Okay. If I say we have common ancestor and you say we have a common ancestor, we agree. I say it's a fish, you say it's a crab. Is the referent the same? It's a good one.
Is the referent the same?
Yeah.
They're both talking about a common ancestor.
Yeah. Common ancestor. It's a common ancestor.
So, well, I don't even know what the referent would be. Is there any referent at all?
Well, the reference would be the common ancestor. In this debate, common ancestor would be God, Abrahamic God, general, like a concept, a category kind of. And then the fish would be the person. The crab would be another person. Who is the referent is the question. Is if you say it's a fish and someone says it's a crab, are they talking about the same?
But that I would ask, do we know for sure that they have a common ancestor, or are they both have no idea? They're both just guessing. Maybe they don't have the same ancestor. Maybe there's two different ancestors.
Are you saying maybe they don't know who God is then? Either in this debate, the Christian and the Muslim don't actually know who the referent is?
Well, the data would be different because in the case of God, we have a history. In the case of the ancestor, I have no knowledge of how they even know who their ancestor is. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Do you want to add anything to that, Alex?
Yeah, so I would say that unless there's some like historical event that shifts the referent, then it would be the same reference. So if you say common ancestor and you say a crab, or somebody else says common, or what was the other animal? Was a crab
Fish.
or a
Crab
fish?
and a fish. Mm-hmm.
And somebody else says, yeah, the common ancestor, the fish. One of them might just be mistaken in their description. I think when you connect it to a historical causative event, right? So like if for 200 years everybody said it was a fish, it was a fish, it was a fish. They discover a fossil that predates the fish, that's a crab. Now the referent for the common ancestor shifts from the fish to the crab because there's a break in the historical chain.
Sure.
So that's how I'm looking at like the incarnation and Muhammad's, revelation through the Quran, is that these are breaks in the historical inheritance that shift the referent for who God is, like the who that Jim Bob was getting at there.
Yeah, but I would agree up until the point where now that we have there was a discovery, we find out it's a crab. The guy who still thinks it's a fish is still talking about that ancestor. He just is wrong that he thinks it's a fish, but really his ancestor is a crab. So he really has the same ancestor.
I would say that if it's out of ignorance, then yeah, it might be the same referent that he's talking about. But if he knows about that discovery of the crab, and in spite of that discovery of the crab, he actively rejects and denies that discovery of the crab, and he still says it's a fish.
Wait a minute.
Now it's a different referent.
Yeah, but
which is exactly what Islam is doing.
Objectively speaking, his ancestor is the crab, whether he likes it or not.
So God is Jesus, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, but he can't just decide that I have a different ancestor now.
Yeah, but he's talking about a different thing. He's not talking about a crab, right? He's talking about a different thing because it's connected to a different historical causative event.
All right, Neil, did you do your homework on the Gettier challenge, right? The problem of the Gettier problem here, would it be, it would help you in this debate. How do you or Muslims know you aren't accidentally picking out a different referent? Good show, guys. If you want, summarize that. I actually am not totally brushed up. I know the Gettier problem was when you come to like
you're accidentally right.
Accidentally right. Yeah.
It's for me.
That was for Neil. The question is, how do you know?
Wouldn't that be a better question for him though? I think that does.
Yeah, either you guys.
Well, I think he's saying that, Neil, you could have argued that, despite getting a lot of attributes wrong, even like essential attributes, like maybe through historical inheritance, the Muslims are accidentally right. And in that case, I would say, well, then again, they're not actually Muslims because then they don't actually believe actively what they believe.
Dude, thank you so much. The other second question I forgot to ask Neil was this. If Muslims and Christians worship the same God, are Muslims more Christian or Christians more Muslims? And how would you determine the difference?
They're not. The names of them are determined by what they're doing now, what their intent is now, and what their theological interpretation is now. So Muslims are Muslim, Christians are Christians. I'm talking about their God having the same origin.
Okay, but if the argument is not the origin of God, but rather that they worship the same referent God, if we define religion or two religions as which God they worship, you would say that Muslims and Christians are the same religion, if I define it that way?
No, not the same religion. Just they have the same God historically, anthropologically, having the same origin.
Right. No, the question is, if I defined religion, right, as simply reduction, worshiping a God, a specific God. If religion was worshiping a specific God, and you could do that in various ways, right? Sort of
Then
like
you
a
can call either or.
perennialist view,
You can
right?
call them either or. It would
You,
it'd be
yeah, so
Yahweh.
Muslims
It'd be
are
Yahweh.
Christians and Christians are Muslims,
It'd be Yahweh.
but they'd be the same religion, generally
If
speaking.
you defined it that religion, that's a weird way to define religion.
Well,
Religion has nothing
it
to
would
do
be
with
a good start point to define religion, like the assumption that you're worshiping a deity, and the deity has attributes, and there's a way in which you're describing the deity, and then
that's why
what you're
scholars
saying-
refer to this as Yahwism.
Yeah. Okay. They developed a new. Okay.
Yeah,
So they
this is an
developed a
actual term
new
people use.
religion.
Yahwism.
Okay.
Gnostics
Okay,
are
so you'd say
Yahwehs.
they're the same.
They're all Yahwehs under this big
For the same
umbrella.
religion, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. One more. Let me see. Neil, can you actually, I missed one over here. Thank you for the $5. Does Gnostic Informant have any proof that Muslims accept that Christ, the fatherhood of God, or the Trinity is accepted in Islam, or is he just mad at Jesus?
I didn't say they believe that.
Well, yeah, they would reject it, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, that would be a dividing point.
Yes.
Yeah, because from my view, I kind of looked at this, Neil, and I was like, sometimes people gaslight people, and it's usually make them feel crazy, like they don't know what they're talking about. But I feel like Vatican II and the argument you're making is actually gaslighting Muslims and saying, no, you really do believe in the true God. You just don't know it. You literally reject Christ, but you just don't know you're incorrectly worshiping it. And they're like, no, brother, we don't. And you're like, yeah, you do. Like, you're almost like positively gaslighting them.
I mean, maybe. I mean, I don't think I am, but
maybe
they are. Maybe their intentions are that. That's what I'm saying.
Neil, can you interpret this verse? Quote, no one who denies the Son has the Father. Whoever confesses the Son has the Father also. 1 John 2:23.
Can I interpret that?
Yeah. Well, I guess from your argument, especially.
It's saying if you don't believe in the Son, then the Father's not with you. You don't have him. So that's a theological argument against people who don't believe in the Son. I mean, it's like a Muslim saying if you don't do X, Y, and Z, then you won't go to heaven or something. It's like, so what? You guys don't care about that.
But don't you think that kind of attribute kind of fixes the referent?
It fixes the referent for who gets saved and who has the right theology. But it doesn't actually do anything about what God is in question and the history and what it is.
Okay. How can Neil argue for a God he doesn't even believe in? Well, you can do that. You could argue the position. It's not that he's saying he's believing it. He can argue for the position. We have a Didache in first century. That's another thing Alex didn't really reference, but like I thought an interesting argument here was, okay, well, if you say Muslims worship the same God, you have to actually distinguish what's worship and what's not worship, right?
I thought so. I made it was kind of like a tag on point at the end was that like, even if they are hitting the right referent, like some ignorant Muslim somewhere that's not actually Muslim,
right?
What they're offering is not actually worship, because in the Christian context, worship would be a sacrifice, right? The Eucharist, an offering. Right. So even if they are hitting the proper referent, which they're not, but even if they are, they're not offering worship. At the very best, it's like some honor.
Yeah, it's like, are they calling the right? I kind of look at the 50s operator. The ladies doing the operating system. You're trying to call God. It's like, how do you know you're hitting the right target, or did you call someone accidentally correctly? And so the question becomes like, well, I mean, if someone can incorrectly worship the right referent, but they're certain and willful. That's the key thing here, is that Islam comes much after the revelation and the life and death of Christ, right? So it's not the same exact thing when people bring up like pre-Christ incarnate Judaism, because there's not the knowledge and art. And you were arguing, Alex, that resolution increases. That's why I asked the Jew question later, like how would the current Talmudic rabbinical Kufi Jew interpret a new Messiah? Would they put them in the category of God as man? Would they actually affirm the God man ever from their theology? I don't
think they
know
could. Like,
Well,
yeah,
it's interesting that Muhammad historically was a student of Salman al-Farsi, or Salman the Persian is translated to, who was an ex-Zoroastrian who converted to Nestorian Christianity, which would be like not exactly orthodoxy. And so he does have a Christian lineage to what he's actually trying to do. I'm not saying it's correct or equal to Christian what you guys are doing, but the lineage is there.
Okay. Neil, if I deny the essential property of God, aren't I denying who God is? If God reveals he's triune and I deny it, aren't I creating my own separate God?
I agree with the questioner.
You're creating your own separate God if
You want to read it again?
if you're just basically he's saying like he's creating a God that has the same attributes.
Yeah, like if there are essential attributes of God, for instance, Alex had them in the opener, the comparison on screen between Muslims and Christianity. They had fundamentally different attributes of God. Muslims don't agree with the Father, they don't agree with the Son, they don't agree with the Spirit. God has two hands, or whatever the hell they believe. Like all this stuff is not matched up. But you're saying, well, no, the title is the same, God of Abraham, so it must be the same God. He's asking, if you deny one or many of those essential properties of God, Father, God is Father, right? Aren't I denying who the God is? And this is this distinction that's necessary, like in the doctor analogy. Doctor, the title, who the doctor is, might be a short doctor, might be a Jewish doctor, might be a hairy doctor, might be whatever. Like, this gets into the personhood, right? The energies, the characteristics of who we're talking about. If you deny those characteristics, I'm not sure. He's asking, how could you affirm that we're talking about the same referent if you deny the characteristics of the referent?
Again, in the case that I'm making, I'm actually pointing to textual evidence where it's claiming this is the God. Hi, my name is Gabriel. I'm an angel of this God who is the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and so forth, and Jesus. So there you have actually something to point to and go, look, this angel Gabriel visited Muhammad according to the Quran. Therefore, Muslims believe, even if let's say it could be a demon that posed as Gabriel, but they believe that they are worshiping the same God as Christians and Jews.
Okay. Neil, this one's for you. How can the same action be both proper worship and, let's say, idolatry or blasphemy? I think he means idolatry at the same time. So Alex did ask you an interesting question there at the end, which was like, someone's worshiping and they're doing it in a certain way, and they're both hitting the mark of the true God, but they're also missing the mark. So is it both? Can you actively participate in idolatry and proper or slightly improper worship toward the same referent? Because idolatry would actually be an incorrect referent. But if Muslims and Christians worship the same God, their action is actually toward the same God, right? That's what you would argue, right? If their actions are toward the same God, then is it possible for them to commit idolatry?
Yeah. I mean, why not?
Well, how would you know if they worship the same God? How would you know a Muslim was committing idolatry?
If we establish what is the true religion, then we can use that as a reference. But if we don't know that, then we're just
okay.
We don't know.
Well, okay. So here's the thing. If I reintroduce the doctor analogy, if we say going to the wrong doctor is idolatrous, like the way in which we figure that out is again the who-ness of God. So if from your view, if you say Muslims and Christians worship the same God, and Christians have an account and a standard for being idolatrous, but Muslims don't, I'm not sure you could make the claim that they worship the same God. Because if they do worship the same God, the same rules for idolatry must apply to the Muslim, no?
If they knew for sure what the truth was. If not, then they both think they have the truth, and they both think the other one's an idolater. You know,
Alex, do you want
like
to add
Muslims
anything to that one?
believe that we walk into an Orthodox church with all the icons. That's idolatry. That's what they believe.
Mhm.
I mean, the part that I have trouble wrapping my head around is that, like, on one hand, you can have, by Christian standards, idolatry, and then the exact same thing by Muslim standards being shirk. And then have that, or like the Christian partaking in the Eucharist, right? Like that is valid worship for a Christian.
Sure.
A Muslim thinks that's shirk, right?
Yeah.
That's like the worst sin possible, to compare God to
Right.
say that God is in bread or wine. How can you be hitting the Muslim God there as a referent when it's the worst sin possible? It seems like like there's no way.
Because it's not the God that's in question. It's the worship and the ritual in the question now. We're not talking about what God it is anymore. We're talking about what is particularly shirk, or what is particular,
I think it is a personal quality, though, because for the Muslim God, like that is a personal quality of him, that he cannot be compared to material things, right? That's kind of like when you give God associates, right? That's like the technical definition of shirk, I think. So it seems like if the Christian God says that you can eat God, and the Muslim God says, no, I can't, I don't see how that can be a form of worship to the Muslim God by taking the Eucharist. Like the Eucharist, it seems like it's impossible to hit the Muslim God in the Eucharist.
I think that's a strong argument. I really do. I still think, though, that it's describing a way of worship, and you're giving theological arguments about God, but it's still the same God.
But if the Muslims are wrong and the Christians are wrong, then it seems like there's just another third referent out there that they haven't discovered yet.
That's actually a good point. Like from this argument, Gnostic, from your epistemic system that you're using, it's kind of like naivete. Like you don't actually know if they're hitting these. You don't actually have access.
I'm not
to
saying the Jews are right. I'm not saying the Talmud Jews are right. I'm not saying Christians are right. I'm not saying Muslims are right. I'm not saying any of them are right. I don't know.
Neil, how can Muslims worship the same God as Christians when, according to Scripture, those who deny the Son is God are Antichrist?
You already did that one.
Oh, right? You did that one already. Sorry. Oh, that was a recent one. Okay. So, yeah, that's an interesting one. Someone, EBT, actually said something. There's only one doctor, he said. Well, hold on a second. Isn't it possible? Like, I'll let Neil field this one. Isn't it possible, from the view you're defending, you don't even believe any of this, but you're just defending, in a sense, you're kind of defending a V2 position here. Isn't it possible to worship incorrectly a demon?
Yeah.
Okay. And so how would your system know if the Muslim is actually worshiping a demon? If the only standard you have is the name of God is Abraham. If a demon could deceive you and say, I'm the God of Abraham, we're close enough, guys. Go kiss this weird, waxy, butthole-looking thing. How would you know if it was a demon? Because that's the third thing. Yes, there's only one true God, right? There's only one true God. However, from this theological perspective, there's also deceivers, right? There's deceivers. Yeah. So you actually could falsely isolate a demonic entity and worship it. The question is, how would Gnostic informant from his position know if either the Christian or the Muslim is worshiping a demonic entity?
I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised if the Muslims were following a demon at this point.
Now you're getting it.
But you would look for contradictions.
Hey, we
you
won.
look for contradictions in the worldview.
He's Christian now.
Yeah. You would look for. I think you look for contradictions, and you go, "Well, this doesn't add up." And you can kind of use. If you have some sort of reference point, you can look for contradictions.
I think an important point also is that, like,
Look, the Christian identity for God is it's like fixed. It's fixed at the incarnation, right? And even St. Paul says that like if even an angel comes, like if somebody else, if we come later and even an angel comes and gives you a different revelation, then don't believe it. It's anathema.
That's in the Old Testament too.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of Jews reject Christianity, though.
Yeah.
They think that's what's going on.
That's why Christians have, like, they claim that their interpretation of the scriptures is correct.
Sure.
So I think that, like, there's a stronger claim for the Christians because they don't actually change the text. The Quran, like, significantly retcons a lot of the New Testament and the Old Testament, like both of them. It's almost like a concession that they're out of continuity, right?
And well, the weird part is they admit to being from the line of Ishmael. And if you read the text about Ishmael and Isaac, Ishmael's kind of the sketch. He's not the loved. He's not the loved guy. He's the casted out one. So
he's not the child of promise.
But. Yeah, they change the story and say no, the Torah or the Tanakh is wrong. Christians and Jews are wrong. It's actually Ishmael who was the promised one. So then you got to go, well, how do I prove that? And you can't. So that could be to answer the question. That could be like, there's your contradiction right there. You know what I mean?
Gnostic, how do you then, like, you see the trend, especially in the Catholic Church, coincidentally, who presented V2 that opens it up to Hindus and all sorts of other entities to be considered, accidental proper reference, improper methodology of worship. The onslaught of ecumenism right now, would you have to extend your argument to Hindus and everyone else? Keep making bridges to,
no.
Well, they're kind of worshiping the same God. They just don't know it. They're kind of worshiping the same God. They just don't know it. Like,
no,
where do you draw the line from your view?
I'm not talking about like perennialism or anything.
Right, but where would you draw the line for that yourself?
Well, do they have the same anthropological origin? They don't. So it's just ruled out right away.
If they don't have the same historical...
The god Shiva has a different backstory. He's from the Vedas and the Mahabharata. Totally different story. With Krishna, for example, visits Arjun to go to war against his uncle. Oh, that's a whole different story going on.
Yeah, but here's the thing: isn't it considered the part of the Christian story that God is a father?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the Muslims reject that part of the story. So on the same standard you reject Hinduism, you should say, yeah, Muslims don't follow the same story.
No, but they still say this is the God who brought the Jews out of Egypt, who was worshipped by Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Jesus. They're still pointing to this particular God.
Again, Christians, per Jude, believe that Jesus was the one who brought the Israelites out of Egypt. But I mean, for Hindus, isn't it just like, can't you go back far enough to where they do have a similar origin story eventually?
No, not at all.
Like, I mean, don't they have like some common, like they migrated from somewhere, right?
They have a flood myth, but that's the different. There's different people.
They worship the god of the flood myth, I guess.
No,
like, can't you make that argument? I'm just throwing it out there.
The character who survives the flood is Manu, and it's a different god who even makes the flood happen. Totally different thing going on.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Here, I don't want to press this too much, but like, if it's possible that Muslims incorrectly worship the Christian God, can't they just incorrectly have the anthropology and like not know they're still hitting the same target?
That's possible.
Like, okay, so really the anthropology doesn't actually matter. Yeah, it means that anybody worship that. Actually, the entailment of that is kind of brutal. That means some 18-year-old chick who believes in feminism, who's on her way to abort her baby, but she's willfully and intentionally sacrificing her baby to like some god she conceives of. It's possible. Like, look, I'm not asking if you think it's the case, Gnostic. Isn't it logically possible from the position you're arguing that the girl who goes to Planned Parenthood and aborts her baby in a known, like, to her, intentional act of sacrificing her baby, isn't it possible she's incorrectly worshiping the triune Godhead?
I don't know why that would be. I'm not.
No, is it logical? Is it logically possible from your position that she is just incorrectly worshiping the triune Godhead?
I don't think so. I have no idea why you'd even think that.
Well, why not?
Is she claiming to?
No, she just thinks she just has the wrong conception of God, who God is. She's just offering her worship and sacrifice. She has the distinction sacrifice, which she gets from the Abrahamic religion.
So she's claiming to be sacrificing her baby to the God of Jacob and Isaac.
She's misinterpreting, or maybe not fully interpreting what sacrifice means. Isn't it possible that the young woman who sacrifices her baby to Planned Parenthood is incorrectly worshiping the true the God of
If that's the case, that you said that she thinks it's the God of Jacob and Isaac, then yeah. But like I said, and you guys would say God would not accept that sacrifice, right? So what is it? And it's just some idiot out there doing some dumb shit. Same thing you say to Muslims.
Right. Okay. Anything to add to that, Alex, or anything?
I don't even think she's hitting the right referent there, but
but she's like in that case she's borrowing a practice, right? Sacrifice needs a distinction theologically. That's why you can't really escape the theological sort of paradigm and language when we talk about this in this debate. So it's like there's no Neil rests on an anthropological, chronological sort of like system, but you can't really separate that from the interpretive analysis of the theology itself, right? It's all one big thing you have to compare, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's a multifactorial. I think the history plays a role, the anthropology plays a role. I think the theology, like all of these things play a role in fixing the referent of the term, right? So I think you need to incorporate all of them.
Okay. I don't see any more questions. Let me make sure I didn't miss any, because I really do appreciate your support, you guys. You guys can yap if I did. I'm looking for questions, though. Not just comments. I really appreciate the comments and the support, but I'm looking for questions, distinct questions for people here. Just make sure. Homework, get your challenge. Got that. A worship. This was a good one that got brought up. A worships an elephant's foot, and C attaches it to a hippo. They worship the same God. The elephant one's good. I think Cleve ran with that one, which was a good one. Like he got a couple people on that. I think that's it for questions, y'all. Hold on. Burnout. Hold on. Sorry. Thank you for. I don't want to miss any. Okay, burnout. Let me see. Is it early burnout or there we go. Question for Gnostic informant. If I worship the God of Abraham, Neil, who historically was worshipped in the temple, but believe him to have all the same attributes as Satan, do I worship the same God as Christians and Muslims?
Well, you just think that you're basically just accusing the Christians and Muslims of worshiping Satan.
Yeah, but how would you know they aren't worshiping the same referent from your standard?
Because you're labeling him as the God of Abraham. Once you've done that, you're talking about one thing now. So then you want to add Satan, and you're just basically saying the God of Abraham is Satan. You're just making an argument now that God is Satan, which is idiot. Or unless he's a Marcionite or something.
I mean, if their intent is Satan, I mean, isn't that their referent?
That doesn't make any sense, though, because Satan is the adversary of God. It's literally what the word means. So they're just confused. They'd just be saying Satan is the God of Abraham. They're just making a theological argument, which is based on nothing.
So they can't hit their referent.
No, I guess that's true. They can't hit any referent because they're just making a theological claim out of thin air.
Just like the Muslims can't hit the Christian referent because they're making a different theological.
I've already, yeah, but it's still the same God.
But okay, the referent refers to the God.
I don't care about the referent because that's the theological argument. That's not. You're still pointing to the same thing.
Actually, brings up this question from Fresh Pill Money. How would you, in this? To add on to this, how would you identify, this is a methodology question, how would you identify the referent for a mental non-physical object? How would you identify the referent?
That's for me?
Yeah.
For a mental non-physical object?
Yeah, like a number or like a concept, like a universal concept, like an avocado. You wouldn't actually point to a singular thing as the mental thing. So how would you point to the mental thing?
Depends on
As
what
a
it
re-
is, to be honest.
So something that's not, I mean, a number might be a good example, like 7. Like, how would you point to that?
I mean, 7 is a number that counts for 7x, 7 something.
So would you point to like 7 coconuts and be like, there's 7?
There's 7, yeah. Or
Okay.
whether to write 7 on a piece of paper, I guess.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think
Same
these
as
kind of
numbers.
questions, like they fit like pretty neatly into the theory that I presented in the opening. That's like there's like the law of identity where there are like certain attributes attached to this thing, and there's also the way that like this term is used historically, like that also attaches some meaning to the thing. So I think like a significant shift in either of those things would change the referent.
Okay. That makes sense. And Neil, you said you're a deist, or you're just like, are like intellectually a deist, but there's no
No.
practice in your life?
I'm not a deist or an atheist. I'm a theist.
Oh, a theist. Okay.
Yeah. Pretty well aligned with Platonism, with a few differences.
And Alex, can you just give a quick background also on you? Like, were you cradle Orthodox, or did you go through? I could see you doing like a cringe worship session.
I did, man. I'm not lying, dude. I was an evangelical Christian rock band worship leader for like
Nice.
many years,
Gross to
many
that.
years. I enjoyed it, but I'm glad, I guess, that like providentially God took me through that, because I grew up so like Pentecostal, so like pretty evangelical, but not like the crazy like on all fours on the floor barking kind of Pentecostal. Like
Yeah.
it was like in the Eastern European tradition, so like there's still some holdovers from Orthodoxy. Like a lot of the women wore head coverings. They just really thought praying in tongues was important, and they didn't really have any structure to the service so much. It was like a lot of
I was
prayer.
Pentecostal for a little bit too.
Yeah, so like they love the scriptures, and I learned that love of the scriptures too. It's just unfortunate, that without Orthodoxy, I don't think they have the proper lens to understand the scriptures in their fullness. So I did a little stint there with the Pentecostals. That was most of my life, and then I had a short stint with like a tulipy John MacArthur style independent Bible church. And that was kind of the other end of the spectrum, where they were trying to be very intellectual and academic.
Okay.
And then I found that like Orthodoxy actually integrates those two things like pretty beautifully, right? So you have like the mystical experience, but also there's like dogmatics galore. Like if you want to find like theological philosophy, like you'll find it. There's no shortage of that at all. And when I came to Orthodoxy, it was just like the result of many years of research and searching. It was a beautiful harmonization of like all these things that I think God providentially took me through them.
I mean,
Yeah,
if there is a church that does have the oldest lineage that goes back to like Nicaea, it would be Greek Orthodoxy for sure.
I'll take it.
Yeah, but the question, Alex, is now that you're a live streamer and stuff, did you ever do a review of all of the cringe footage from you? and why not?
I don't know. That's a good idea for a stream.
Dude, an evening stream, a couple of drinks in, grab some people, everyone watches it together.
Yeah, let's go over. We could do like a panel, right? We could get like yourself, Jay, Ben, Jonathan, Pesho.
Yeah. We should roast you. Yeah.
You could do like roasts of the Orthodox YouTube community.
The past. Gnostic, why ought we value an anthropological argument over a foundational argument of identity?
Because it's a methodology that is not biased. It's about the data. It's arguing from things we know and going from the known to the unknown. So it's more reliable in that sense.
Okay, but throughout the debate, you kind of looked at like any theological sort of like any theological lens that was used. Wouldn't that be incorporated with our interpretation of the anthropology too? Like, don't we interpret anthropology through our current lens?
Yeah, but you're also looking at the history of a tradition over time and seeing how it goes from one thing to the next. So I'm tracing it back to a place where we can all agree, and place in time in history where we can point to there's archaeological evidence for it. Almost 99.9% sure it happened, which is the Temple in Jerusalem. That's why I'm starting with that.
Okay.
Something physical that we can touch with our hands and go, that happened for sure.
I think Bob, you might be onto something there. Like at the end of the day, I think it really is our theology that dictates our lens for how we see everything else. I think that's probably the most foundational part of our worldview. And if you start with anthropology, like there's maybe a vicious circularity there. Where, like, you need your theology to inform your anthropology, and if you're going to analyze your theology through anthropology, well, then there are already assumptions like baked into that. There's I think that's worth the.
If you can inform your theology with theology, then you're going to have your advantages baked in. I think that's the other way around.
Yeah, everybody has presuppositions.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah. Wait, do we get Gnostics to admit he's a pre-supper? Can we get that?
Well, everyone
Look at the camera, maybe?
Everyone presupposes something, right?
Yes, we're all pre-suppers. Yeah, that's what we're trying to get on our side, is that everyone starts with their presuppositions, and then the clash of presuppositions tries to run us backward to basically ultimate recursion or circularity, right? We're trying to get to the ultimacy of the beginning and the end of all things, and we think that Revelation gives us that, and the atheist or the empiricist thinks the world. I don't even know what you guys think anymore, honestly. I don't know if you think the world reveals stuff to you. I don't know if you think trees and rocks and crabs give you knowledge. I honestly don't understand why. Honestly, this is a separate topic now. I don't understand why the atheists and the groups basically you guys run with are so reluctant to try to engage with, like, say, tag or something that's more fundamental as a start point. I don't understand it. Why
Because
everyone just like,
atheist
tag's so gross. You guys are retarded. It's like, wait a second, hold on. Like, is there a necessary starting point or not?
I think atheists are trying to prove they can have knowledge without presupposing that a mind brought forth the universal or something like that.
Right.
Just by starting off with, we can know things like the snow is white, for example, and like move out from there.
Right, but I guess when I don't know if Alec, you run tag much. You're pretty academic. You kind of keep it there, but like the question ends up being like, is there a set of necessary preconditions for you to be able to say the snow is white? That's actually what we're asking. Are there a set of preconditions that need to be the case?
Yeah.
For even you as Neil, the person, the human, the mind, the biological mass,
You
to
can
say, oh, look, snow is white.
You can
Yeah,
say,
and like, are those presuppositions justified, right? So like,
yeah,
they're going to have presuppositions, but do you have a reason for them? Like for the Orthodox Christian, we ground them all in God. If you don't have that, I think what Jay is like always getting at is that these things just seem arbitrary, right? Like, okay, so empiricism, right? Well, why do you assume regularity in the universe and in the telos, like meaning in things, right? And it's like, well, because just look around, you see it, and that's just not a good enough justification, right, for the Orthodox Christian.
Yeah,
at least
it
the person
just is.
tag. Yeah, it just
Right.
is.
Right.
Right. Well, what do you mean it just is? Like, okay, then God just is. Now I use the same reasoning as you. Now we're in the same spot all over again, right? So it's more of a question, I think, of whether they're adequately reasoned out, whether they're adequately justified.
Yeah,
I think that's what makes tag so powerful, is that like really only Orthodoxy has the toolkit to justify those things.
In addition to that, is that when we look at like Neil, maybe you'd agree with this. Like, if you look at your own experience of reality, you have a thing that you interpret as hard, concrete reality, things that operate a certain way out there.
And then you have your own experience, which is like your own mind, a knower, an evaluator. But then you have this conceptual realm that we all share, like universal categories and things, the way in which we talk about things. And there's this unity. So you can't really just look at the material world and be like, look, we got it, guys, the material world, because the conceptual reality isn't actually found in the material reality. And so, like, from your perspective, you're not really like a hardcore atheist.
I'm not an atheist at all.
How would what do you take, like, how do you navigate or justify that, like, there's a conceptual reality from our perspective in our own creed, the invisible? How would you justify the invisible from your view? Like, what is the ontology of the invisible?
What do you mean these invisible?
Concepts, laws of logic, number, universal.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm very closely aligned with Platonism, Neoplatonism, with a lot of differences. But
like there's some logos principle that flows from the one, basically.
Yeah. I think the Platonist worldview can account for things pretty well, as far as things that you're talking about.
All right. We have one actually special guest. Look at us. Look at us go. I don't know if he's live. Let me see.
There he is.
Live? There he is. Oh, look at how perfect the placement is. This is Chase. Chase.
Am I in the thing?
I know, Chase.
You're in a thing. You're in between the people. So
What's up, man?
How's it going, guys? How's it going, Neil? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I hope that this isn't like an ambush or anything. It doesn't feel like an ambush. Just asking a question.
I like this stuff.
No, and we get along well. Like, I like you too. I'm
Gay.
no. Stop, Jim Bob. Stop. You're embarrassed.
Oh, sorry, you guys. I thought I was muted.
Stop, dude. Neil's not gonna think I'm cool. Stop.
Got him.
I'm curious. So it seems like I know you want to make a hard line division between like theological and like a causal chain, kind of like Kripke theory of reference. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think that can really fully be done because the historical is tied into the theological of what's being revealed. But do you think that there's times where a referent can shift and no longer refer to the same thing when there is a statement of fact that is true that thing once referred to?
It can, yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So like, for instance, Madagascar, right? We know that as an island off the coast of Africa, right? A bunch of African mainlanders in the time Marco Polo were calling Madagascar the mainland. So when we say Madagascar now, what am I intending when I say that? When I say Madagascar, knowing that historically before Marco Polo, the Africans called it the mainland. Now we refer to it an island off the coast of Africa. What am I referring to when I say Madagascar?
Really, right now you're referring to the island.
But I also brought up the causal chain of the mainland of Africa. So it's going to depend on my intent, isn't it?
You're still talking about Madagascar. You just have different interpretations of Madagascar.
Oh, I'm talking about the signifier. I'm using the same signifier.
Yeah.
So Madagascar,
Mhm.
When I say that word right now, I can be referring to the mainland, just the entire African continent, can't I?
And objectively, you'd be incorrect. We've proven that it's an island now.
Well, you haven't proven if it's an island. There is masses of land. What's in question is the signifier, right? You've proven it's an island. No, the name, the reference shifted over time because of a causal chain broke, and then now it refers to something else. It's not proving it's an island, right?
We've changed what we know about Madagascar, but it's still the same place in question. It's that strip of land that those people live on. It's still the same place.
But to people on the African mainland before Marco Polo, they referred to the continent of Africa as Madagascar.
Oh, but so now you're talking about the actual continent itself.
That's what people that Marco Polo encountered called the African mainland, and then he.
Oh, I thought you said he met people on the island.
No. He mistakenly called the island off the coast of Africa Madagascar.
You're talking about. So you'd be talking. we're talking about the mainland. Then the mainland is the thing in question.
Well,
When
no,
you
the
say
names,
Madagascar,
the reference is what's in question. Is it's, and I'm showing that it depends on the intent and how causal chains can break.
I agree with that. But
Okay,
you
so
still
now
can't change what is what. You still can't change what the mainland is or what the island is. Those still exist.
where the island is, what. So yeah, you can't change what that thing is.
Yeah.
But how you reference that thing, what signifier you use, can shift, and it's going to depend on the intent, right?
Yeah, depends on
Right.
Yeah, the intent. What do you mean by it depends on the intent, though?
So it's just showing that the same signifier can refer to different things, and the referent can shift over time, and a causal chain can break. Another example is, let's say, like Kripke used this himself. I hear someone saying the name Napoleon a bunch of times as a child. I never learned about Napoleon Bonaparte, but I heard the name a bunch. I get a pet armadillo, and I name it Napoleon Bonaparte. When I say Napoleon Bonaparte and someone else hears it and they think of the French leader, right? Is that who I am referring to? Or is that who they? Okay, there we go. So that's another example of just the referent shifting.
Yeah, but Napoleon Bonaparte is still Napoleon Bonaparte. You're naming it after somebody.
That's not the intent.
Yeah, but that's the original Napoleon Bonaparte.
Well,
That's
that's
the thing that we're
the original. I mean, okay, you're saying that's the original, but that's not who I'm referring to about my pet armadillo.
right. But do you also go, my pet armadillo fought in the war against the Holy Roman Empire, took them out, and made the Pope anoint him? Then you'd be talking about a specific time in history where Napoleon did those things.
Let me interject
But
here for a
Napoleon's
second.
not an armadillo.
Hold on a second. Let me just interject here, Neil. Napoleon fighting a war would be equivalent to us referring to Christ as dying and resurrecting, though. So now you're using a historical account of something occurring to then delineate who we're talking about. So
imagine if someone rejected the idea that Napoleon, this has actually happened, by the way. He got stripped of all his offices and was sent to go live on Corsica, on the island of Corsica. And he was supposed to never come back. And they just moved on without him. They were going to kill him, but they decided to just exile him. Imagine if someone rejected the idea that Napoleon actually came back and fought more wars at the end of his life, which is literally what happened. It doesn't matter if you can reject that, you just be wrong, but you're still talking about Napoleon.
If you're trying to intend that person, not the armadillo that I named Napoleon Bonaparte.
Yeah, right.
So I'm just showing that intent is gonna matter. Kripke even brought this up, and it's interesting because I see it shifts from a very, like a baptism of terms and a causal chain, and then Alex showed how the causal chain got broken. I showed multiple examples of it being broken, and then I never hear any verification principle beyond, well, they say it's the God of Abraham. Napoleon Bonaparte example shows that won't hold. The Madagascar example shows that doesn't hold. We need a verification principle, and when you reject the empirical verification principle, like the analogy of the painting of we're both looking at the same painting, it could be purple, green, blue, whatever, right? But it's the same painting. Well, that analogy assumes what's in question. We're asking, what's the verification principle of knowing? Yes, they do. For the debate prompt, you're taking on the position, yes, they do worship the same God. What's the verification principle that they do?
No, and that's why I'm trying to point to something we can all agree on in history that we can touch, archaeology, things that happen in history like the temple. And for the case of the armadillo, the person can think this armadillo fought these wars in history and went and fought the Holy Roman Empire, went into Russia, and then lost. And all those things actually happened. They're pointing to a real thing in history that Napoleon Bonaparte actually did. They're just wrong about they think he's an armadillo for some reason.
Yeah, they're signifying the wrong referent.
Yeah. No, we agree on that part. I agree on that part.
We agree.
But that's the debate, right? That's the debate.
Still the same thing.
But that's what you haven't established that. So saying like, oh, it's the God of Abraham.
But that would say that they don't believe in that it's a God at all. It's still a God. So we're not changing. Like an armadillo versus a man are two different things. Muslims are worshiping a God. who
A
they believe is
triune
the
God
of
is
Abraham.
different than an occasionalist God. Yeah, they say it's the God of Abraham, and we believe that the God of Abraham is triune, and the God of Abraham is Christ, and that Christ himself revealed himself in the burning bush. He spoke with every single
Yeah.
like major old. He walked with Adam and Eve in the garden. Like these things, we're saying that's who that God is.
But
That
how
is
do you
the
know
God
you're
of
not
Abraham.
talking about the armadillo?
Well, because
How
I
do you know the
believe.
church isn't talking about the armadillo and you're just following the church?
Yeah, because I'm using a different theory of reference where we have a causal chain as well as essential attributes. The causal chain is going to go to Christ's revelation, that empirical verification principle, and then the essential attributes, because we're also talking about something not empirical, but you jump from trying to disregard the essential properties of the thing being referred to when it's been demonstrated the causal chain has been broken. That causal chain no longer stands. And you just keep saying it is the same God of Abraham. What method are you verifying that by?
An anthropological one.
Okay, but we say that referent totally shifted. It's the same thing as the Madagascar example.
And I agree.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good job, Al.
Yeah.
It
It's also ends up being a little bit worse than that too, because like from Neil's perspective, which he kind of conceded during the after debate talk, is that they could both be wrong. They could both be missing the mark. There could be a third unknowable reference that they're actually really trying to refer to that they don't know. So like, which is it? What are you using as the ultimate referent to say that the Muslims are actually referring to the same referent? Are you using the Christian one? Well, if that's the case, like Chase said, none of the attributes don't match. The anthropology doesn't match. The history doesn't match. There's a shifting.
The causal chain is broken.
Yeah, it's broken. So you actually have to say the best you can do, Neil, is say it could be, but I don't know.
Yes, and that's different than affirming, because when we ask for the verification principle, we show it's going to be a causal, it's going to be a baptism of terms, and then a causal chain, and we show how the causal chain breaks. Even by Kripke's own examples, he would show this is far broken, for 1,400 years, 2,000 years. It just seems like it just then comes back to, well, they could be, and I think that's a better defense. But I don't want to keep you guys here. Thanks you for having me up, Neil. Thanks for chatting. Alex, great job.
Yep.
Everybody, have a good one.
This. Thanks,
you, Chase.
One last question here, and we'll.
I agree with everything Chase said.
Yeah, Neil said the dialectic justifies his epistemology, but doesn't he know the dialectic assumes epistemology? It's like your metaphysical. Epistemical cart before the horse, I guess. So that question is for you. When you say that the dialectic justifies
epistemology is a lot of things. What your epistemology? How do you come to know things? Dialectic is a part of that. That's how you determine things. That if you have, for example, two different people disagreeing on something, you would use the dialectic to further advance on what the truth is.
Okay.
Whatever.
Okay. Anything left for you guys? I think we got through everything. Thank you guys so much for your super chats. And I think we got through almost all of them. My bad, I accidentally voted for Gnostic. Someone voted for you on accident. Nice. It was a wrong reference. He actually meant Alex, but we don't actually know.
I don't think there's any way to know.
Yeah.
Gnostic, did the Samaritans worship the same God as the Jews? Because Jesus didn't think so.
The Jews didn't think so either. They had their own temple, and I actually excluded them. I even brought them up in the beginning. I said there's another temple in Samaria, and there's even one in Alexandria, Leontopolis, that started in the Maccabean period. But I excluded those because I'm using the Temple of Jerusalem because we can trace it through time better, and so yeah.
All right.
I mean, the Samaritans do worship Yahweh. They have the Torah, so it is the same God, essentially.
I mean, the Quran says the Samaritans were there at the golden calf incident in Exodus. So, I mean, I think everybody agrees that was wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Actually, one last question. Could I invent a religion right now? And as long as I use a couple of references that seem to be compatible with the Abrahamic trend, could I add in a third God that I am
incorrectly, but improperly, but worshiping improperly, if I just invent one, as long as it has some of the key components of the Abrahamic chronological references? Like, could I just invent one?
I think it's a good, like, interesting thought experiment, right? Like, if I just wrote a fan fiction, kind of like Game of Thrones, something, and I was like, hey, look, this is about the God of Abraham, but like you've never heard a story like this before, and you just like make the whole thing up. Like, are you still hitting the right reference? Like,
I mean, you're referencing the God of Abraham. You're referencing that one thing, but now you're adding in all these things that are maybe there's some contradiction, maybe there isn't. You know, and some people might argue that's exactly what Islam is doing and Christianity is doing, is taking the God of Abraham and inventing new things. There are mythicists out there who think Jesus never existed, for example. So it depends on what the situation is. Some people can make the argument that it is that.
What about Mormons, from your view? Would you make the same debate, but in favor of Mormons too?
Yeah, they worship the same God.
Okay,
I do.
All right.
I mean, they claimed it. I mean, they claimed.
So I'm just over here missing out on Space Wives for like no reason.
Yeah, Celestial Kingdom, dude. You can have your own. You can have your own celestial water park, dude. Fool.
I'm not saying that they're correct or, you guys might have a better theology and it traces back better to the apostles or whatever, but they are still attempting to worship that one God that we all agree exists in this place of time.
Isn't that kind of like that hypothetical we just went through? That's like somebody wrote a fan fiction way later. Like, couldn't you argue in a sense that like Joseph Smith was just just took all these elements and like created a whole new mythology?
Yes, and I think that's exactly what happened. But he's using a God who's really been worshipped and who existed, not literally, but like who is worshipped in Jerusalem for X amount of years. He's using that one thing that we're talking about. That's the thing in question.
Even if like the father in their view was a literal man at one point that through apotheosis became like, is that still the same God?
That's them making a claim about the God of Abraham.
It seems to me like at that point there would be some divergence, and like historically the use of the term would be like Joseph Smith again that's what Mormons tie the referent God to, and it takes on like a different meaning, right?
Yeah, it's
so
like as Chase said, it's like you have to basically say from your position. And by the way, your position you're actually defending is actually the Catholic position for you Catholics in the chat. You actually have to make elastic the law of identity. Really, that's what you have to do.
No, because X is still X. It's still
he just doesn't have any of the same attributes.
Attributes is how we. That's more of a theological opinion on these things. Like, for example, Jews actually say this. They say God created Mormonism so Christians can know how Jews feel. They think you're doing that. They think you're creating a new thing with their God. That's what they say. How do you have to debate them to see who's wrong,
Well, the difference here is that Muslims, Mormons, any of the reformers, they actually have to borrow the Christian holy tradition of orthodoxy and revelation and then pervert it. But the original thing doesn't pervert anything. So you're really looking at like, well, what is the secondary thing chronologically speaking in time doing, which it's referring back to something and then twisting it. Right. And so if you said there was this guy, like Superman kind of guy who existed, and then there was 1,000 years later, a group of people discovered the Superman story, but then twisted it. And then the people who were originally there who maintained the tradition of Superman that said, listen, dude, you guys are lying about this. You're literally misrepresenting the traced history of who we're talking about. Your argument is, no, it's the same person. It's like,
still Superman.
No. Well, no. Is it really Superman if it's a woman?
Is that what they're saying? They're claiming it's a
You're
woman?
arguing for a trans theology, basically. Well, no. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Saying,
if they were wrong, look, that should really move you, Neil.
No. It's
move you
a
off
fair
of your
point.
position right now.
It's a fair point, but the thing in question is still Superman.
Not if it's a
still
woman.
Talking about is Superman now a woman because these people said so. They'd be wrong, but They're still
They'd
the
be
thing in
trying.
question is still
Yeah.
Superman.
So look, Gnostic, let's take it into reality. You go to a bar, you get a little too lit, Gnostic. You're talking to some thing that you think is a chick, right? Like they're really selling it, dude. You meant to have sex with a woman. You intended.
And I didn't.
Let's say you did. You intended to. You just incorrectly had sex with the right referent, which wasn't a woman, but it was actually a dude.
That analogy does not work.
Yes, it is. The analogy is exact, dude.
Because it's not a woman. So if you trace it back anthropologically, it's not a woman. The thing in question,
you didn't know though. No, you were in ignorance like the Muslims. You didn't know.
But the thing in question is still that particular person being whatever it is.
You didn't know. You thought it was God. Right? Like, look, swap woman with God. The true nature of it would be that's actually God. That's actually God. That's actually a woman. You thought so. You were just incorrectly worshiping. Let's swap worshiping with coitus. You were incorrectly doing the activity, right? Just like the Muslims are incorrectly worshiping, right? It's
but are you saying the Muslims are worshiping some demon figure?
I think that.
Okay.
Even Catholicism thought that. Yeah, even Pope Urban thought that.
Yeah, I don't even disagree with that a take. But I'm saying
the question is, did you ever have to deal with that at a bar, Neil? That's the question.
Thank God. I don't even go to bars anymore. So
all right. With that, I'm going to wrap this up, you guys. Any last, you guys could plug your channels, of course, please, one at a time. Gnostic, why don't you go first?
Yeah, man, I had a good time with this debate. My channel is Gnostic Informant on YouTube. I do a lot of early Christian histories on my channel with scholars too. So check it out.
All right, cool. Alex?
Alex Soren, you can find me on X, Instagram, YouTube with just my name. If you just put it in there, you should be able to find me. I'm a lawyer. I'm not a theologian or anything, but I took my venture into orthodoxy really seriously and a lot of research on it. And I do videos on Orthodox apologetics and theology and some like debate tactics. Sometimes we'll like break down, like Andrew Wilson and Gnostic Informant and Neil and like all these debaters that you see on screen, like talk about like what did they do right, what did they do wrong. So a variety of stuff we're getting over there. So if you put in Alex Soren anywhere, you can find me over there.
Yes, we have a lot of promise. If the trend is ortho people are really mean, Alex, you can't possibly say that. So we're gonna bring our best, right? So with that said, I'm gonna move over to my normal kind of stream and hang out with you guys a little bit. In the meantime, I'll say goodbye to you two, the interlocutors, and if you guys in the chat want to do a debate, and Alex and Gnostic, if you think there's future debates you'd like to do on my channel, let me know. And I want to do more, probably once a month, do this. And so I'd love to do that. But you guys did great today, and I really appreciate you guys' time. And I'll see you guys next time, and I'll see you guys in probably each of your chats here and there, okay?
All right. See you guys there.
Right. Thanks, guys.
I think I'm able to jump over to my own chat. Let's see what we got going on here. Am I still live? I hope I'm still live. So let me just turn on the chat. I think I'm looking at the chat. Let me know if you guys can still see me and hear me. Because I haven't never tried this before where I just switch back over to my own thing. Let me know. Put in the comment. I'm looking at the comments right now. And I'll start going through some supers. You guys can see me? You are there. Yes. Yep. All right, cool. Now what I have to do now is I have to go to the YouTube and actually find the super chats that are in my studio. So what'd you guys think about that shit, by the way? Was that fun? That was a good debate. I like the topic a lot. Alex is a nice guy, I think Jim Bob was a very fair moderator. I like the topic a lot. I enjoyed the topic.
Oh, God. What are you doing? Oh, God.
All right, let's see. All right. Let's go to the super chats. Supers. Where do I go? I think it's in Earn, Super Gifts. There we go. All right, so there's quite a few of them here. All right, let's start with the first one. Lyphaeus, thank you for the 2. The debate ended before the openings finished. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Of AI and men, thank you for the $4.99. The reason Pharisees and Christians was over legal matters like keeping Shabbat, claims being Messiah, etc., has nothing to do with what God. Thank you for that super chat. I couldn't agree more. KK, thank you for the 2. Christians themselves can't agree until Crusades. Yeah, and then at the Crusades, especially the Fourth Crusade, you have Catholics sacking Orthodox Christians. Literally, they were supposed to go to Jerusalem to reconquer Jerusalem, and instead they go to Constantinople and conquer Constantinople. Like, wow, that's one of the craziest things that ever happened in history, I think. Thank you for that. Yuri Hustri, KK with 5 more. I think it's Yudhishthira, I think that's his name, from the Mahabharata, is the spiritual son of Yama, the god of the afterlife. Due to a curse, Queen Kunti used a boon to invoke Yama to father her eldest son. Interesting. Thank you for that. Kurt with the $2, thank you for the super chat. Is Amun the same god as Amun-Re? It is. That's a great. I wish this. Kurt, my bad for putting up my own stream here because they didn't get to read this one. Thank you for that's such a good question because it is. It's the same God. It's just incorporating Ra or Re in the Greek sense, and they're incorporating the attributes of this other solar deity. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they come from different local. Like Amun is the god of Thebes, the Theban god is Amun, and I think Re is another solar deity from either the same pantheon or a different pantheon. I'm not sure exactly where their origins are, but at some point you get Amun Re. You even get Ra Horus as a god. Re and Horus come together, and that's why they both have the falcon interpretation. But it's the same. It's like so. You can have gods come together and it becomes one god. Sometimes they have gods that are compared, and sometimes there's synchronicities. So it depends on which god. It definitely depends. You can't say they're all just the same. But yeah, Amun and Amun-Re, I say the same god. Dr. Who Manuel, thank you for the 5. Neil, can you recall any that claim, the ultimatum that like your opponent used of Jesus? Hold on, I think there's another super chat popping up right now.
At Wes_CWW dropped $5 super chat. How about this for a debate topic? Christ is king means the same thing as the youth when they say 6,7?
That was good. That was good. Thank you for that. I think you're right. Can you recall any gods that claim a belief ultimatum like your opponent used of Jesus and the Father? Fallacy, in my opinion. John 2:23 is akin to shahada. Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think you can say, I mean, it's all just theological. Here's my theological interpretation. Anyone who disagrees with this doesn't actually worship my God. I just don't find that convincing at all. Another super chat.
At Lythia's dropped $2 super chat. Check out my song lyrics on the Myth Vision Discord.
There you go. Check out the song lyrics on Myth Vision Discord. Thank you for that super chat. Spiritual Rants, thank you for the 5. Alex, how do you know so much about God? Why do you... Here's another super chat. Damn, you guys are dropping them on me. Thank you for the super.
At KKS4 who dropped €5 super chat. Dude, Amun, Ra, and Amuna are pronounced Jaman and Jamuna. Their origin is in Rigveda. Yama, Yami.
I don't think so.
Amun Raj, king of underworld.
That's not what Amun's that's not the pronunciation of Amun's name. Amun, the god Amun, is I believed. Hold on, let me just look it up. Well, I can tell you right now, it's definitely not from India. That's for sure. the Veda. The pronunciation, I'm trying to find it. Is it not in here? Let's see, I don't know, I can't find it. Yeah, he was the god of thieves. I mean, that's something we can show. It's like he's the god that was the main god of Thebes. Just like you had other gods, like Ptah was the god of Ptah. What was the god Ptah the god of again? Ptah was the god of Memphis. The Memphis, he had the Memphis triad. Then you have the Heliopolitan Aeneid. There's 9 gods there. That's where you get Ra, I think. And then Amun's there too. Heliopolitan Aeneid. You have Atum. That's what I meant. Okay, so the sun god Atum, not Ra. Atum, and then the nine gods underneath them.
At KKS4 who dropped €2 super chat. Rigveda doesn't come from India, bro. Winking face emoji.
Rig Veda does come from India. I think you're thinking of the earlier traditions that are the Indo-Iranic layer that's in the Rig Veda. The text that we have today is an Indian text.
At a Rokoda 3,590 dropped $10 super chat. I'm author. Most religions has some sort of apophatic element to it. God's essence, Sunyata, Brahman, Greek chaos, Ginungogo. Do you think these are all trying to refer to the same referent?
No, there's comparisons to be made, but I don't think they're all trying to do. They're not all doing the same thing. I think there's a lot of there's different river gods in different places, and you can compare them to other river gods, and you can make those comparisons, but I don't think that they're necessarily the same thing. That's a very perennialist kind of approach. I don't really take that. Right before that, though, the Rig Veda one. So the Rig Veda, from what I understand, people who study the Rig Veda, what's his name was big into this. J.P. Mallory in The Search of the Indo-Europeans. Georges Dumézil points out that the Rig Veda has older mythological tropes that are necessarily older, but not the text that we're looking at. The Rig Veda is written in Sanskrit. That's the Indian language. So it's Indo-European, but it's Indian.
Yes, 4 who dropped €2 super chat. Wanna bring me on? Gonna get true gnosis, bro. Smiley face emoji.
I appreciate that, but I'm not bringing anyone on for this stream right here. I'm just gonna do some super chats, and I just had this debate, and I'm gonna call it a night pretty soon. But thank you for that. Maybe next time. Next time I'll let you on for sure. Thank you for that. So yeah, the Rig Veda, its earliest layers are among the oldest extant texts in any Indo-European language. Many scholars believe the sound texts of the Rig Veda have been orally transmitted. So those orally transmitted verses seem to have some sort of older mythological tropes. That's definitely something scholars agree on. But the text that we have right now, when you open up the Rig Veda and start reading it, you're reading a text that was written in India. It's an Indian text, borrowing tropes from Indo-Iranic, Indo-Aryan mythology, for sure. That's why there's so much that lines up with the Gathas, Homer, stuff like that. Thank you for that, though. So the next one, it's going to go to Alex. Thank you for spiritual rants. Alex, how do you know so much about God? Why do you feel that you have the authority to judge others on their worship? It's a good question. Why does he think that? He's just assuming. It's begging the question. That's why I said after his first run, when I went to my second run, when I was doing my response, I just said this is begging the question on steroids. Because he's literally going, Muslims don't worship this God because they don't believe this, this, and this. It's like you're begging the question. Why do you assume that your interpretation, that your church's interpretation is correct, when the Old Testament, for example, and the Torah doesn't have the triad or the Eucharist. So how do you know you're not the ones that are in the wrong, and the Muslims are going back to something correct? How do you know that? They have no idea of knowing that. There's another super chat coming up.
At Grandpa Dot 10 dropped $4.99 super chat.
Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate you. Of AI and men is the claim that I have only true God because it is mentioned in a book of fiction that is based on a much earlier book of fiction is preposterous. Couldn't agree more. Thank you for that. Despossany Dynasty. Thank you for the 2. Islam comes from the Nabatean Christians via Ebionites. That's very possible. That's very possible. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of indirect or even direct lineage back to Ebionite Christians. At some point, though, it's like you can kind of look at what was going on at that time period in the 7th century. You had these Nestorian Christians. Let me show you what I mean. Nestorian. Can I share my screen on here? I don't know if I could. Let me see. I'll try. Let's do window capture. Let me know if you can see this. Can you see this? No? Let me see. Window capture. Oh, there it is. So Nestorianism, you can see here, is a term used in Christian theology, Christian history, mutually related but look at this, doctrinally distinct sets of teachings that fit under the type of theophysitism. These are the Christians that lived, and this is Nestorius of Constantinople. Let's check him out. He was this Christian who served as Archbishop of Constantinople from the 5th century. He was a Christian theologian, and his teachings in Christology were seen as controversial and heretical. 431, he was condemned and deposed from his see, presided over his arch rival Cyril of Alexandria. Let's see. Nestorius himself used the title Theotokos, Mother of God, but did not advocate for its ban. His teachings included cautious usage of Theotokos, God-bearer, used for Mary, Mother of Jesus, in order that Christ's human and divine natures not be confused. Here we go. We got another super chat.
At Smillstill dropped $5 super chat. Love to see a show on how a Christian minority in a tolerant government became all-powerful and oppressive to all other faiths in 60 years.
You mean 60 years from the Council of Nicaea till the Theodosian decree? Is that what you mean? That's a good question. Once they got a little bit of power, they went all in and they didn't want to let go. That's kind of what happened. Because in between that, don't forget, you have Julian the Apostate, who in the 350s was trying to reverse what his uncle did. Constantine is his uncle. And he tries to go back to a time before the Christians had any power and failed. And because of that, once the Christians got back into power and there was another Christian emperor again, that was it for the pagans. Theodosius was like, we're not letting that. We're never gonna let that happen ever again. And they did what they did. But that's a good. Yeah, we should do videos on that. That's a really good topic. I should do a video on that. So this guy is what I'm getting at is this guy right here was this heretic who had some crazy ideas, but you can see the Nestorians they were like moving away from the Trinity and the idea that Christ is God. They were making him more subordinate again. And these Nestorian churches are all over the East, huge in the East, in Arabia, and they branch off into all different types of Christian, like the Persian Nestorian church, the Church of the East, for example, Syriac Church, School of Edessa. You know what I mean?
At KKS4 who dropped €2 super chat. Just Google JMNJMNT, Amun, it brings up first.
Yeah, but then that's not how they pronounce it though. It's weird. So hold on. I was looking for it, but I can't. Pronunciation. It's not from India either, so it doesn't even matter what like it's like ah. It's pronounced like ah. Amun. I can't see. I can't find what you're looking at, but for some reason, it's not. I'll tell you one thing. If there is like some sort of spelling where it's spelled like that, you can't just. That's not how you do etymology. You can't just find two words that look similar, or even if they're spelled exactly the same, it doesn't matter. Amun is a god from Thebes, who goes back to like 3000 BC. And maybe not 3000, but like 2000. I think he's definitely old dynasty god. He definitely goes back that far. Let me see. Yeah, it looks like his first attested is 2350 BC. Pharaoh Unas from the 5th dynasty, which is still old kingdom. So he's very old and very well attested. He's not from India. There's no connection. So, but thank you for that. So back to what I was saying. You get these. Where was I? Oh, right here. You get these Christians who are in the East who are falling under these different Nestorian ideas. Like, look at this one. Isolated pockets of Christianity survived only in India. The religious victors of the vast Central Asian mission field of Nestorians were Islam and Buddhism. Oh, never mind. That's something else. A brief definition of Nestorian Christology can be given as Jesus Christ, who is not identical with the Son, but personally united with the Son, who lives in him in a hypostasis. So they even go a step further than the Trinity. They're like, yeah, there's a Trinity. Yeah, there's a Son and there's a Father. But Jesus was just temporarily part of this whole thing. He was just a human, dude. So you can see how Islam adopts something similar to this, where he becomes mortalized again. So I don't know, but I guess what I'm getting at is I don't know if you can point to the Ebionites as the origin. I think if there's a different lineage, it goes into Orthodoxy and then out of Orthodoxy through Nestorius, and then you get Salman the Persian. Watch this. Salman Persian, this guy right here, companions of Muhammad, who was a Zoroastrian, and then he became a Christian. And you can see right here, conversion to Christianity. He was I don't know why it doesn't say it here, but I almost know for certain he converted to Nestorian Christianity in particular, which is a big clue of where Islam comes from. Like you can see, like he became a Nestorian Christian, and then he essentially influenced Muhammad, who, whether Muhammad wrote the Quran or someone else did, the point I'm trying to make is somehow, in some way, Nestorian Christianity ends up influencing Islam. So, let's go to the next super chat. The next super chat is from Dr. Who Manual. Quran 310, 319, 109, 161, and the Bhagavad Gita 1816. Sadly, the debate became man's declarations of right, belief, practice, intent over God. I agree. Thank you for that super chat. Despacini Dynasty, again, thank you for the super chat. Why not address the Nabatean teacher of Muhammad? I brought up. Are you talking about Salman the Persian? Salman al-Farsi? I brought that up. I don't know. Is that who you're talking about, the Nabatean? Because I don't know if he's a Nabatean. He's a Persian.
Maybe you're thinking about someone else. In Islamic tradition, there's no Nabi and teacher of Muhammad. Several accounts, the figure is Bahira, also known as Sergius, a monk who lived in Basra, Syria. Yes, Sergius. I forgot about that. Here, let's pull this up. So this is Bahira. An Islamic tradition of a Christian monk who is said to have foretold Muhammad's prophethood. Yeah, but I don't know if this guy was ever know. I don't know if he ever knew Muhammad though. I don't know. I know that if you're going to point to someone, it's probably Salman the Persian. When they met while Muhammad was accompanying his uncle Abu Talib on a trading trip, there are several versions of the story. Huh. Yeah, there's all sorts of Christian origins to Islam. I think that's what we're both getting at, is that there's definitely Christian origins of Islam, and I couldn't agree more. The next one is from same person, the Spasini dynasty. Holy cow. Mod, bring up the supers I gave. Yeah, so for some reason, the supers on my side were not going to his side. So I'm sorry about that. That's why I figured I'd jump on here and read them for you guys, because I want to just leave you guys. I appreciate the support so much, dude. Thank you. And there's one more from Despasani Dynasty. We all worship the same God of our own mind. I mean, that's a perennialist approach. I understand it. I get it. I don't know if I subscribe to that idea. I don't think that's the case. I think people, when they talk about gods, they talk about specific things. They talk about specific things that happened, specific traditions. I think it's more about tradition than it is about theology. Tradition to me matters more than theology. That's what I say. That's my personal thoughts, though. But so that's it for now. What else are you guys? What's going on in the chat? Let's see. Carl would debate Neil on if he counts as white or not, and make Neil do push-ups to prove his whiteness. Oh God, you guys are crazy. Ravana is Ahriman, the jealous god by the tree. Huh. Anyways, I'm tired. I gotta call it a night soon. I got a big debate in 2 days from now. A bigger, more important debate than this one was, with Matt Beal and Dan Dunking. So I gotta make sure I'm not staying up all night like I've been doing, and get back into a regular sleep pattern so I can get up and drive to Matt's, which is about an hour away and towards Tampa. So, all right, guys. Thank you for the supers. Thank you for the. I'm gonna do another live soon. I think maybe not tomorrow night, maybe 2 nights from now, or Saturday night. That's what I'm doing. So I'm doing a live on Saturday night, and I think I'll do like an open thing. So be ready for that. Be on the lookout for that. And that's it. You've just attained